Chapter 680. The third year of the Dark Portal was a relatively peaceful year for the Alliance. Duque continued to teach Jaina viciously. No, he taught her with all his heart. He used a completely different teaching method from the Dalajan mages. In terms of personality building, Duque would bring Jaina to the Tirisful Forest to wipe out the orcs, or to the Swamp of Sorrows to clean up the orcs and various swamp creatures there. Under Duque's torment, the once beautiful princess would often leave the house clean in the morning and come back at night looking like a girl made of mud. Kul Tiraz's chief maids and female officers had sent letters of complaint to their countries at first, but they soon realized that even after they had been confirmed and presented to King Daelin, they were still like rocks in the ocean. They also realized that their king had tacitly agreed to all of this. In the field of magic, Duque's teaching method was more like a free-range one. After the system scan, Duque told Jaina that she could learn any type of book in any region. If she couldn't find a book, she could ask a ghost. Ask Khadgar. The bored Khadgar would read magic books every day because he had nothing to do, so he was more proficient than Duque. Of course, Duque always had a way to show off his existence and value. Every time Jaina cultivated a new spell, Duque would always be able to see where Jaina's problem was at a glance, as well as the metamagic abilities on how to cultivate that spell. After a while, no matter how unconvinced Jaina was, she had to admit that this teacher, who was only 4 years older than her, was indeed qualified to teach her. It was now May of the third year of the Dark Portal. It was the end of spring and the beginning of summer, and the cement road that traversed the entire elven forest from east to west was basically completed. With Duque providing the technology and the dwarves doing the work, the railway project that employed a large number of Stormwind workers had officially begun. At the same time, the equally grand reconstruction of Stormwind City was underway. Clayan had once doubted whether it was reliable for a country as weak as Storm Kingdom to carry out two projects that cost a lot of money and resources at the same time. In terms of money alone, it had cost more than 10 million gold coins. No one could calculate the amount of money needed for the various small projects. Duque replied, "If someone else were to do it, it would be suicide. However, I'm a once-in-a-thousand-year internal affairs genius in Azeroth, so leave it to me." Duque's words were very arrogant, and the ministers were not convinced at first. It had to be said that it was too easy for a university student who knew a little about the market economy to transmigrate to this medieval world. Blindly giving out alms such as disaster relief food and clothing did prevent the worst situation of people starving to death in the beginning. But if he did it too often and for too long, it would produce another result. It was easy to raise lazy people. It wasn't that there weren't any holy people in the world. It was precisely because there were too many mediocre people that people yearned to be saints. On the other hand, if all the people in the world were to live like ascetics, 99% of them would not want it. Duque's approach was to use work as a form of relief. The first step was to make an announcement and directly tell the people that the country had just been destroyed and that the country had no money. In order to let everyone tide over the difficulties and not starve to death, the country had handed over all its savings. A lot of money and supplies were borrowed. It wasn't a simple announcement, but the mayor, village chief, and civil officials everywhere rushed to the people to publicize it almost every day. The second step was to implement the IOU system. The kingdom didn't have that many gold coins in circulation. Fine. IOU. Duque used 3 days to set up a complete IOU system. Those who took the country's disaster relief food in the winter would write an IOU based on the quantity and quality. Those who took cotton-padded clothes would also owe. Those who obtained a new house would owe even more. This was all owed to the kingdom. Then spring came and it was time to start paying off the debt. When the farming was over, they would have to work for the country according to their own abilities. How much would it cost to build the railway in a day? How much would it cost to join the patrol team? After a while, the people discovered, hey, working for the country to pay off the debt, in the end they could still get a few more IOU every day, which could be used to exchange for necessary food and daily necessities. The IOU that Duque made couldn't be counterfeited because it was a magic item made by the magic apprentices he recruited. The cost of making the IOU itself far exceeded the value of the IOU itself. As a result, a complete internal circular economic system controlled by the planned economy was formed. It started operating in March for 2 months. When Lang cautiously came to Duque to ask how much the country owed, Duque directly gave him a deficit of 0. Oh no, it was a lot of surplus. Lang and the ministers of the interior were dumbfounded. Lang was already mentally prepared to sell the land and the state's assets so that the people could live a good life. Anyway, most of the nobles had been wiped out before, and their fiefs had fallen back into the hands of the Rin family. It was still possible to live by selling the land. Now, Duque actually told him that not only did he not suffer a loss, but he also made a huge profit. Lang didn't understand. The ministers of the interior didn't understand either. Duque shook his head as he explained. Let me tell you. IOU is actually gold coins. It's just that I took advantage of everyone's gratitude and secretly lowered their wages. Then I created a market environment where gold coins can't buy things, but IOU can. This caused everyone to unknowingly do a lot more work for the kingdom. Now, we don't need to spend money to feed the people and we don't need to spend money to rebuild. But we still receive the gold coins from the countries of the alliance. That's the money for building the watchtower. However, a very important part of the initial investment was to build this railway across the Elven Forest. I used this to invigorate the market economy of Stormwind. In addition, because of the smooth transportation, the specialties of the various regions of Stormwind have also begun to be collected by the kingdom. The kingdom will sell them directly to the maritime merchants of Kull, Tiras and convert them into foreign exchange. So in the latest March and April, the kingdom has a monthly surplus of about 1.2 million gold coins. After Duque finished calculating the accounts, Lang and the ministers of the interior were all on their knees. Unfortunately, due to cultural differences, otherwise they would all write the word convinced to Duque. Duque smiled and looked into the southeast. His gaze seemed to pass through space and fell on the door of darkness thousands of miles away. Sorry, tribe. Our alliance has revived ahead of schedule. What about your tribe? The tribe on the other side of the door of darkness, very bad. At the end of last year, when Kilrog Deadeye's Blood Ring clan and Kargath Bladefist Shatterhand clan returned to Draenor, they faced a world that was completely out of control. The tribe that had lost its chief once again returned to the chaotic state of the clans. Almost for the entire winter, the clans were fighting each other. Chapter 681. In the First and Second War of the Dark Portal, the Horde was arrogant and seemed to have an endless number of troops. It was largely because of the worsening natural environment of Draenor. The reason why Dan was able to lure so many beastmen to their deaths was very simple. Since they were all fighting and killing each other, rather than letting so many fierce beastman tribes fight each other for a smaller and smaller piece of cake, it was better for everyone to go to another planet and fight for a bigger piece of cake. However, with the defeat of the Horde and the fall of the strongest clans in Azeroth, the lack of resources in Draenor seemed to have become less scarce. The Blackrock clan, which was originally the #1 clan, claimed to have 500,000 warriors at their peak. Of course, this was an exaggeration, but there were definitely 300,000 adult orc warriors, and most of them were absolute elites who had experienced the war with the Draenei. Unfortunately, they were weakened by Duque's many tricks, and even the last seed was lost in the sea in the southeast of the Lordaeron continent. The only remaining clan was the Blacktooth clan, which was split from Blackhand's two sons, Rend Blackhand and Maim Blackhand. After chasing after Dan, they directly left Orgrim's control. It could be said that the absence of the Blackrock clan had freed up the living space of at least 3 first-rate clans for the entire Horde. Then there was the Warsong clan, which was second only to the Blackrock clan. Unlike the original history, the Warsong clan was thrown into Azeroth early in this war. Now, after Southshore and Silverpine Forest suffered a series of heavy losses, the entire clan was trapped in the Tirisful Glades. Then there was the Frostwolf clan, which was also one of the first-rate clans. They were not much different from the original history, and were directly banished to the Alterac Mountains before the official start of the First War of the Dark Portal. Then there was the Storm Predators and the Blackscar clan, which were at the bottom of the first-rate clans. Finally, there was the Blood Ring clan, the Shattered Palm clan, and the Dragonmaw clan. These were the 3 first-rate clans that suffered heavy losses, but still returned to Draenor. Unfortunately, due to the significant decline in population and warriors, they had become second-rate clans. All in all, the first-rate clans had nearly 1 million people empty, and this did not include the losses of the second-rate and third-rate clans. If the orc laborers, who had always been ignored by the chiefs, were included. In the 2 wars of the Dark Portal, the Horde had lost more than 2 million people. If anyone checked carefully, they would find that more than 1/3 of the warriors had drowned in the sea. The Alliance had to give Duque a thumbs up. In the tribe, population and warriors were synonymous with territory. Without population and warriors, there would be no territory. There were more vacancies than in history, which led to a new round of reshuffling of power. When Orgrim was still around, none of the clans that stayed in Draenor dared to make a move even though they knew that the chief was still alive. The Orgrim captured and the clans of the Wolf Clan, of Dragon Clan and Wolf Clan. For example, the White Claw clan was exterminated because they sympathized with Durotan and the Frostwolf clan's misfortune. The Thor, Thunderblade, Mockingskull, Crimson Walker and Chuban Eater, who had stayed in Draenor for various reasons and had yet to be sent to Azeroth, gained the greatest advantage in this shuffle. Before winter they had more than doubled their territory. If it wasn't for the cold of winter, and if they had a little foresight, they might have been able to make Kilrogg Deadeye and Kargith Bladefist suffer a grievance. While Draenor was busy fighting on the eastern kingdoms of Azeroth, the revival of the countries continued. Obviously, the revival of the southern continent was faster than that of the Lordaeron continent. In the north, whether it was the Silverpine forest that had been burned to the ground or the Warsong orcs in the Tirisfal woodlands, Tyrrhenus could not do anything. He could only hope for the harvest of the fields near Stratholme this year. After all, it was away from the forest, and the orcs would not dare to come out and face the knights of Lordaeron. Barnil, Felstone and Maris, these famous grain-producing areas were Lordaeron's last hope. He even hoped that if Deathwing became the king of Alterac, at least Alterac's 10,000 acres of fertile land in Hillsbrad could be temporarily given to Lordaeron. The nearby Dalagen and Stormguard were finally on the right track. But no one could compare to the prosperity of the south. Even if Tyrrhenus did not want to admit it, he had to admit that there was no other genius in the world like Duque, who could create an independent economic system out of thin air and revive the whole kingdom without spending a single gold coin. Hell, if Kalia was here, I would marry Kalia to Duque even if it was embarrassing. The only good thing is, Dalen didn't seem to benefit from it. Tyrrhenus had thought of imprisoning Kalia for life because she had embarrassed the Menethil royal family. But when there was a greater benefit, Tyrrhenus hoped that his dead daughter would crawl out of her grave so that he could sell her again. This was the despicable politics of the royal family. When everyone's attention was on Stormwind, one day in mid-May, Antonidas suddenly received a request for a meeting from Duque. It was not an urgent request, but one that went through diplomatic procedures. The former Dalagen mage, Lady Ilucia Barov, personally submitted it to the Foreign Affairs Department of the Kirin Tor Parliament. Even though Antonidas was obsessed with magic experiments, he still received Duque the next day. "Oh, my dear Duque, I thought you had the blood of dwarves in your veins. Railways? Trains? Looks like you're better at dealing with dwarves than you are at being a mage. Alright, what brings you here?" Antonidas hugged Duque with a hint of dissatisfaction and a hint of mockery. "I'm so happy to see you in such good health, Master Antonidas," Duque said politely, then went straight to the point. "Actually, I came this time because I received some unconfirmed news. But this news is too important, so I had to come personally." "What kind of news?" Antonidas pondered. He knew Duque very well. Even though this young man's plans seemed wild and unconstrained, he had never failed before. From the war with the Horde to the victory ceremony of Lordaeron with the 4 Dragon Kings. Duque's actions always had an obvious purpose. If you ignored his actions, you would be tricked like Tyrrhenus, and don't blame him for not informing you in advance. The warlock King Ghoul, Dan's master, Nazul, has his eyes on the Dalagen Eye. Chapter 682. The Dalagen's Eye was a super arcane magic artifact, the treasure of the Dalagen. Suddenly hearing this name, even someone as mature and steady as Antonidas could not remain calm. It was no secret that the Dalagen possessed the Dalagen's Eye, but the news of an evil super warlock coveting the Dalagen's Eye made the Kirin Tor Council president feel as if he was sitting on pins and needles. "Duque, this news is not funny. Where did you get this news? What does the Horde want the Dalagen's Eye for?" Facing the serious Antonidas, Duque explained, "I found the Book of Mediv in the library of Karazhan." "Mediv?" Antonidas whispered, feeling his stomach begin to twitch slightly. "The Book of Mediv? The world's greatest wizard, the one who helped the orcs open the first dark portal, his magic book? That book contained the secrets of magic that all mages yearned for. Was it in Duque's hands now?" Antonidas had an indescribable envy. Although he was only one step away from becoming a demigod as a Breaking Dawn wizard, if there were no accidents, this step would become a chasm that he would never be able to cross. If he had the Book of Mediv, he might have a chance. But he knew that Duque, as the successor of the Mediv, would not even lend him the book to read. On the other side, Duque found the Book of Divine Artifacts. It did not take him much effort to find it in the middle of the Medivh study, on the day that Duque cleared the last hostile boss in Karazhan. As if a switch had been flipped, this Book of Divine Artifacts, that recorded most of the powerful magic of the Medivh, appeared on the bookshelf in front of Duque. It was a huge and thick book. Its red cover was lined with brass, and there was a coat of arms with a flying crow on it. Unfortunately, Duque could only read a very small portion of the pages. The rest of the pages were all sealed by powerful magic. The system indicated that it could only be opened after becoming a Breaking Dawn wizard. Now, what Duque showed Antonidas was an illusion of one of the pages. On the page there was a drawing that looked exactly like the Door of Darkness in the Cursed Land. However, this door wasn't in the Cursed Land. Looking at the drawing of the surroundings, it seemed to be in an unknown world. This is, according to the demonic language that I deciphered, there are two dark doors. One is in Azeroth and the other is in Draenor, where the orcs are. They correspond to each other. Although you and I once worked together to close the dark portal, we only closed the portal itself. When we first created the dark portal, we didn't fill in the gap in the spatial barrier of Azeroth. Antonidas stroked his long white beard as he digested Duque's words. Continue. Duque pointed at the illusory page in his hand. If anyone can obtain the perfect structure of the dark portal and the coordinates of Azeroth from the Book of Medivh, if there is a powerful force that can reactivate the dark portal, such as the Dalajan's Eye, if there is a controller, Antonidas continued, then the reopening of the dark portal is no longer just an illusion. Duque came to a conclusion on this matter. About that controller, do you have any clues? The Kirin Tor Chancellor frowned. Yes. The scepter that Ghoul, Dan used, Sargeras' scepter. According to the orc captives, Ghoul, Dan led his clan to abandon their tribe and went to the tomb of Sargeras in the Endless Sea, hoping to obtain the power of the fallen titan from Sargeras' corpse. Obviously he failed. The orc captives said that Ghoul, Dan was drowned by the demons that escaped from the tomb. The tomb of Sargeras. Just hearing about it gave him a headache. If it was during peaceful times, Antonidas would definitely not mind summoning a group of bored mages to explore. After all, they were Dalajan mages. If they didn't die in an explosion in the laboratory, they would die in all sorts of suicidal incidents. Only 1 out of 100 would have a good ending. What's the attitude of the Dragon Slumber Shrine? It seems like the dragons are temporarily unable to enter. However, Alexstrasza promised to send a small team to monitor the area and kill any demons that come out. Antonidas sighed. It seems like we don't have any good ideas in the short term. Yes. I'm also here to remind you to take good care of the Dalajan's Eye. In my opinion, as long as the 3 artifacts do not fall into the hands of Nazul, the Alliance will not be in greater danger. At least we won't have to face the third war of the Dark Portal for the time being. Well, thank you for your notice. I will immediately convene a meeting of the Kirin Tor Council to discuss this matter and strengthen the level of protection for the Dalajan's Eye. Duque followed up with a few words and left. Through the portal, Duque returned to Karazhan and saw Aurelia, who had returned to rest. Without saying anything, Duque directly embraced this noble and wild female elf into his arms. Duque, what's wrong today? The female elf sensed that the atmosphere was not right. After a few seconds of silence, Duque suddenly said, Aurelia, do you believe in fate? Aurelia's brilliant golden hair seemed to be shining, and her sexy red lips curved into a smile from the bottom of her heart. I do. If there was no guidance from fate, how could I possibly fall hopelessly in love with a human child like you? Then, do you believe that fate can be changed? Leaning her head on Duque's shoulder, Aurelia enjoyed this quiet embrace, gently using her chest to feel Duque's powerful heartbeat. 2 years ago, when Stormwind City fell, didn't many people also believe that in the face of a powerful tribe, destruction was the only fate of humans? Then, who led them to launch a counterattack and finally to victory? Duque smiled. Yes. There was nothing to be afraid of. According to the original history, Aurelia would have joined the Alliance Expeditionary Force to counterattack Draenor, and then completely disappeared in that terrible big explosion, and was regarded as dead by the Alliance. But so what? I have already changed the fate of too many people. Lang, Lilith, Lothar, these important figures who had sacrificed themselves heroically in history were still alive and kicking at this moment. Lang was teaching the little Prince Varian. Lilith was still happily traveling the world. Anduin had just won the arm wrestling competition in the army. The only one who died before the notification seemed to be Nesario. What else do I have to be afraid of? Chapter 683. The reason why conspiracies were terrifying was that they were hidden under all appearances. The cheating behavior of a transmigrator knowing the plot was, in fact, an unreasonable act of penetrating the fog and reaching the essence. Now, the only thing that Duque could not be sure of was another thing. Why did the robbery team sent by Nazul succeed so easily and snatch the 3 artifacts? One of the most important reasons was that the Wings of Death, Nesario, had intervened. With the help of the former dragon aspects, the Eye of the Dalajan, which was stored in the most tightly guarded treasure vault of the Dalajan, was no different from an exhibit in a glass window. The problem was, Nesario had already been killed by Duque. If the theft of the 3 artifacts had failed, the door of darkness would not have been completely opened again, and there would have been no expeditionary army, and there would have been no Draenor explosion. This is awesome. Just thinking about it makes me feel good. I don't have to work so hard anymore. Duque hugged Aurelia tightly. It was a feeling of wanting to rub his lover into his body and become one with him. Smelling the fragrance floating between the golden hair, Duque swore to himself, "Come on, Nizul. I don't care if you're the first orc shaman or the powerful Lich King. I've already dug a big hole for you. Let's see when you jump into the hole." Strategies were especially effective when one's strength was insufficient and one had to fight the strong with the weak. When one's strength was strong enough to defeat the enemy, then it would be meaningless for the enemy to play any tricks. In the 3 years of the Door of Darkness, the whole year was spent in the midst of the kingdom's reconstruction. In May, Stormwind announced the implementation of compulsory military service. Every adult man over the age of 16 must undergo 3 months of military training. In addition, women who mastered the skill of the javelin would receive additional rewards. In June, the steam crane jointly improved by Duque and the dwarves was introduced to the reconstruction site of Stormwind City. The reconstruction work was greatly accelerated. At the same time, the Alliance built the watchtower in the Cursed Land. In July, the Stormwind engineering team, under the cover of Duke Marcus' private corps, paved a cement road to the Reedridge Mountain in one go, reaching the entrance to the Swamp of Sorrows. In the same month, a large number of Murlocs and Nagas entered the swamp and fought fiercely with the swamp creatures and the orcs wandering in the swamp area. The supply route to the Alliance's barracks in the Cursed Land became smoother. In August, because the first batch of summer grain in the western wilderness had a good harvest, a large amount of grain was transported to various parts of the Elven Forest through cement roads, quelling a possible food shortage. At the end of September, the Elven Forest had a bountiful harvest, and the whole country rejoiced. In October, the construction of the cement road that connected the entire Swamp of Sorrows from the north to the south was completed, and many sentry towers were built along the road. In November, before winter completely set in, the double-track railway that traversed the entire Elven Forest was completed. This meant that the triangular junction area from Stormwind City to the Reedridge Mountains could now be reached in 2 days. Trains that used early steam engines could now pull 4 carriages at a time, transporting nearly 1,000 soldiers to the Red Ridge Mountain quickly. It was said that a newer type of steam engine was already being developed. In December, the Southern Continent Defense Command was established in the Reedridge Mountains, with Anduin Lothar as the commander-in-chief, and Turalian as the commander of the Overwatch stronghold in the Cursed Land. While the Alliance was vigorously rebuilding and preparing for the upcoming war, what were the Horde doing? The Horde was still fighting. A spiked battle-axe modified from a giant beast's lower jaw was brandished by its owner, its speed and power so astonishing that when it struck its target, it already released a sharp whistling sound in the air. Under the winter sun, dozens of pillars of blood spurted out from the neck of the orc powerhouse that was struck, emitting a fierce radiance. The owner of the axe laughed maniacally, opening his lower jaw that was covered in green tattoos to an almost impossible width. As he moved, his long black hair fluttered behind his head, and his blind left eye emitted an indescribable red evil light. His remaining eye kept turning, following his axe as it chopped at the enemies that dared to stand in his way. Wait. Too weak. Too weak. Scum like you can't even win against humans, and yet you dare to come to my Bloodring tribe's territory to die? Kilrog Deadeye roared. He continued to swing his axe, beheading his fellow orcs from different tribes as if he was cutting meat. Victory was undeniable. However, Kilrog felt a sense of emptiness. The enemy in front of him was too weak. Compared to the human holy knights he had fought before, it was like the difference between a wild boar and a giant dragon. His exquisite skills and great strength were rendered useless. Kilrog. Kilrog heard someone call his name and snorted. He turned around, forcing himself not to be immersed in the desire for a bloody battle. Kargith? It was Kargith Bladefist. Barging in while 2 tribes were engaged in a fierce battle was not a rational thing to do. If he was not careful, he would provoke both sides to attack him. He did not care. Because he was Kargith Bladefist. Strolling on the battlefield, Kargith was practically taking a leisurely stroll. If any blind orc pounced at him, he would use his severed arm's serrated evil blade to send that guy to reincarnation. The battle was actually coming to an end. This small tribe that had gone mad from hunger had foolishly barged into the territory of the Bloodring tribe, which seemed to have fewer people. From the start, they were destined to have a tragic ending. They did not chase after this small tribe as Kilrog's subordinates would do it themselves. Kilrog carried his serrated battle axe as he walked towards Kargath. Even though he had just been engaged in intense activity, he was now only lightly panting. He raised his head to look at Kargath. No matter how many times he had seen Kargath, the evil blade on his severed arm would always leave a deep impression on him. Old friend. Kilrog waited for the leader of the Shattered Palm tribe to walk to his side. They held each other's hands tightly. Of course it was the right hand. Kilrog did not want to hold his opponent's blade. Looks like your tribe hasn't recovered yet. You should learn from my tribe. Kargath revealed a rough and cruel smile. Kilrog rolled his only remaining eye. You bastard, do you think anyone can learn from your Shattered Palm tribe? Directly cutting off an arm and equipping it with a blade is equivalent to joining the tribe. Thanks to this cruel yet simple and effective action, the Shattered Palm tribe's population rapidly expanded. The Blood Ring tribe will rise again. However, have you had enough of this boring internal strife? Yes. If it wasn't for Ghoul, Dan, we would have won long ago. Chapter 684. These two powerful chiefs were convinced that all of this was Ghoul, Dan's fault. On the main road of Draenor, the plains that were originally covered with trees and vegetation had become lifeless. The trees that were once full of vitality had all withered, and the sky that was originally blue had now become as red as blood. All of this was because of those warlocks and their endless thirst for power. Not only that they had destroyed Draenor, but Ghoul, Dan was the mastermind behind all of this. It was also because of his fault that the tribe was unable to defeat the Alliance and conquer that world called Azeroth. This was all because of that cunning warlock, and his people had betrayed the tribe at a crucial time, and went to that damned demon King Sargera's mausoleum to seek power, causing the front lines to collapse. What should we do? You're already the wisest chief I know. You're not as good as me in battle, but I'm not as good as you in intelligence. Kargath didn't hide his weakness at all. I'm not as good as you in battle? The place where Kilrog's dead eye was emitted a dim red light, but this light disappeared in a flash. He didn't need to argue with Kargath. He was very clear about how ruthless Kargath, the madman who had broken his own arm when he was imprisoned by the ogres, and who had killed his way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, was. Once he provoked this battle maniac's desire to fight, then the outcome wouldn't be decided in a day or half a day. First, we need to form a new core of the tribe. Core. Yes. A powerful clan alliance that all the clans have no choice but to acknowledge, just like the Blackrock clan in the past. Without a powerful core as a flag, that group of people with brains full of muscles who only see the increasingly smaller hunting grounds in front of them won't listen to anyone. Kargath muttered to himself for a moment. The Blackrock clan is destroyed, but if only the Warsong clan was here. Yes. It's a pity that Hellscream is trapped in Azeroth. This was a chain reaction. If only one Blackrock clan was kneeling in Azeroth, then there would naturally be a second and third clan that followed closely behind. However, it was precisely because he was clear about the structure and relationships of the tribe that Duque acted very decisively. Getting rid of Blackstone, trapping Warsong, crippling Blood Ring, Dragon's Maw, and Shattering Palm, in addition to Frost Wolf, who had already been exiled to begin with. This was no different from wiping out the top 5 clans of the Horde. Right now the tribe was without a leader. Duque did not know that he had pushed the tribe too hard in the Second War, which directly led to the delay of Nuzul's emergence. What's more, he didn't know was that at some point in the future, an intense argument had already broken out about his existence. In an illusory, incorporeal spiritual space, several voices were arguing loudly. Duke Marcus is definitely a desecration and destruction of the timeline. Let's be clear. We Bronze Dragons are the protectors of Azeroth first, and then the protectors of time. Are you sure this Duque is on the Guardian's side? One of the possibilities we have deduced is that he will become the Lich King. That's only one out of 1,024 possibilities. Why don't you say that there's an 82% chance that it will become better? There's a 17% chance that it will remain the same? No, tampering is tampering. We must give him a warning. Karo, stop right there. The Bronze Dragon King Nozdormu at that point in time has clearly rejected all interference from us. Even if you return, it will be meaningless. Your power will be weakened to the point where you're weaker than a mortal. All right. I'll compromise this time. Next time I'll do it myself. Speaking of which, it was inevitable that Duque would incur the wrath of the Bronze Dragons of the future timeline, because this guy had already begun to play with the changing of the era. If the previous Azeroth was said to have a typical medieval worldview and magic, then now Duque was single-handedly pushing Stormwind City and Iron Furnace Castle from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. In fact, Duque really wanted to push Azeroth to the Industrial Revolution in a short period of time. Unfortunately, the three dwarven races that represented the highest technology in Azeroth, dwarves, gnomes, and goblins, had all chosen the wrong technological talents. It was not an easy task to retract all of their unreliable ideas of seeking death. At first, Duque wanted to promote the use of rifles in the human army. Unfortunately, the level of firearms in this world was currently at the level of those that used solid bullets. Not only was the barrel thick, it could not fire continuously at all, and it could easily explode. When the enemy was charging, arrows could generally be shot 3 times, but this time was only enough for 1 shot from the gun. Even something like a 3-shot shot was not enough to make up for this substantial firepower deficiency. So, Duque had to continue playing with shields and spears in the front row and spear throwers in the middle row. The only big change was that Duque had introduced the dwarven mortars. The mortars of this era were not standard mortars. They were more like support short-barreled cannons, but Duque had improved the cannonball and the gunpowder of the cannonball. The original solid cannonball was replaced with hollow iron balls filled with iron pellets to increase the destructive power of scattering. The gunpowder was changed from adding gunpowder powder each time to storing the gunpowder in a gunpowder bag wrapped in oiled paper. When ignited, the gunpowder would still ignite, but the time needed to add the gunpowder was shortened, and the rate of fire increased. Duque began to train the mortars. After all, this could increase the firepower of the soldiers in short-range firepower support. Standing at the shooting range of the Overwatch fort, watching Duque's mortar team fire shells at a rate of 2 per minute. Each shell could accurately blast more than 10 armored scarecrows into pieces. The high-ranking officials of the Alliance were speechless. It feels like we spend 10 years to train a knight and he's gone in a minute on the battlefield. It's not as good as training a group of mortars for 3 months. Anduin had his hands on his waist helplessly. Duque shrugged. It's not like you haven't experienced the Battle of Blackrock Mountain. If it weren't for the dwarven steam tanks, would we still be standing here talking so leisurely? Yes. Technology is the #1 productive force. The gnome great craftsman Jerbin recited Duque's famous saying. Anduin looked at the huge steel vehicle that came from the north, passed through the drawbridge, and drove into the Overwatch fort along the huge tracks on the drawbridge. He sighed deeply. I didn't believe in technology in the past. Even though I've been to the Iron Stove fort, I still can't imagine that it only takes a day to cross the entire elven forest. It only takes 3 days to get from Stormwind City to the Overwatch fort. Anduin Lothar, who had stayed in the unbuilt Overwatch fort for a period of time, knew very well what a miracle it was. Chapter 685. Dark Portal Year 4, October 16th. This was a big day worthy of the entire Alliance's commemoration because on this day, it announced the completion of the reconstruction of Stormwind City, the construction of the Overwatch stronghold that was responsible for monitoring the Dark Portal, and the opening of the entire railway that spanned more than 2,000 kilometers, spanning across 4 major regions and connecting Stormwind City and the Overwatch stronghold. Using 2 years to create so many things, not to mention the amount of manpower and resources used, just this short period of time was enough to shock the entire Alliance. Impossible? Tyreenas almost fell off his throne. No way. I've only just finished rebuilding the inner city. Salas, whose home had also been demolished, looked at his Riptide castle, which was now a size smaller, and smiled bitterly. What was even funnier was that after Gilneas broke away from the Alliance, King Xeon Greymane acted as if he was possessed. He was worried that the alliance of almost 10 kingdoms would interfere with Gilneas' internal affairs. Since last year they had given up on the southern part of Silverpine Forest and started building the Greymane Wall along the terrain. Xeon's method was similar to Thoradin the Great's construction of the Thoradin Wall to ensure the safety of the earthy highlands. However, it was infuriating to compare oneself to another. Gilneas had only just finished building a wall, but it was already announced that both cities had been completed at the same time. Old Jean's face was slapped so hard that it was bright red. That's impossible. How did Duque do it? Xeon cursed from his throne. I heard that he boldly used goblins to help him, and even pulled over a lot of giant arcane puppets. Gnomes? Arcane puppet? Duque must be crazy. You can't blame Jean for saying that. Almost all of the intelligent races on the continent didn't have a good impression of the gnomes. They only knew how to destroy things without building anything. No matter where they went, they would create a foul atmosphere. However, it also depended on how it was used. No matter how unreliable the gnomes were, there were a few things that allowed the gnomes to be at the forefront of the world. The first was the goblin lumberjack. These gigantic robots were as tall as 2 people. Even though their terrible fuel engines produced ear-piercing noises all day long, and they constantly produced pungent smoke, the efficiency of the goblin lumberjacks was far above all other races. Even the thick-shouldered orc laborers couldn't compare to these robots that had sawtooth circular chainsaws installed on their arms. The second was goblin gunpowder. Don't think that the goblins were a bunch of fellows who were adept at using gunpowder and shouting, "Explosions are art." Another way to use the goblins was to use them to blow up mountains. The ground of the elven forest was mostly flat. After laying gravel and wooden ties, the rails would be very stable. Starting from the Red Ridge Mountain, it was no longer possible. The rugged Red Ridge Mountains originally only had a narrow, winding path. To get the trains through, it must be widened. When Duque chanted the mysterious spell that had always been effective against the gnomes, I'll give you a lot of gold coins. Afterwards, countless goblins' eyes turned red as they howled and charged up the mountain with explosives. The continuous explosions could even be heard dozens of kilometers away in the East Cove lumberjacks. The crazy goblins blew up rocks and themselves into the sky. Within 3 months, they blew up the canyon near the triangular intersection into a basin and turned the natural moat into a passageway. According to the original agreement, after the completion of the project, Duque would pay more than 15 million gold coins for the cost of blowing up the mountain. Every big boss in the Alliance was shocked to hear this amount of money. However, one night, half a month before the project was completed, an accident happened. For some reason, a rumor was leaked that the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza had helped to eliminate a big demon in the Blasted Lands. As a reward for the Red Dragon army agreeing to leave a small team of Red Dragons in the Blasted Lands, Duque prepared a sum of up to 1 million gold coins for the Queen. That night, a few groups of goblins risked their lives to sneak into the Queen's temporary cave in an attempt to steal the gold coins. In the end, the Queen was furious and went on a rampage. She killed nearly 1,000 goblins at the campsite and burned them all. *CK. In the spirit of a fair and just contract, I invited you to work for me. But you came to steal the money of the Alliance's most important ally? I'm hiring workers, not thieves and swindlers. Duque waved his hand and told the goblins to scram. At first, the goblins wanted to argue and ask if they could get half of their wages, but Alexstrasza, who was beside them, shouted, "Scram! If you talk any more nonsense, I'll burn down your hidden treasure bay." If one had to ask what was the difference between a goblin boss and a normal goblin boss, it would be that the goblins had some brains. They knew that the goblins couldn't afford to offend the Red Dragon. If they had to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for not controlling their brainless subordinates to steal the Red Dragon Queen's treasure. The Queen unleashed a wave of dragon might, and the goblins ran away in fear. Then they didn't even have to pay the 15 million gold coins. A few big bosses in the Alliance turned around and wondered if Duque had purposely blackmailed the goblins. That's right. He did it on purpose. The goblins were a race that only cared about money. As for moral integrity, they would sell it for money. They could work for the beastmen, the dragons, or the fire elementals. Whoever offered the highest price, they could sell off their previous employer in the next second. Last year, Dallin had taken the fleet of Stormwind and the fleets of the 2 countries to Hidden Treasure Bay to cause trouble for the goblins. The goblins had to cede territory and pay reparations. They had to hand over almost all of their warships. This year they finally had a big deal. The goblins had used up almost all of their gunpowder stocks. Who knew that apart from the 1 million gold coins down, they wouldn't receive anything more? The goblins were furious and aggrieved. Although they had doubled the price of the cheap gunpowder and added a 0 at the end, they still felt that Duque had cheated them. This time they had been cheated by Duque. Yes, Duque had indeed cheated them. So what? Duque would never let these bastards join the Alliance. Moreover, in the original history the goblins were on the Horde's side. After using them he would kick them away. Moreover, the entire Alliance was cheering. The last key to quickly building Stormwind City and the Watchtower was the arcane puppets. These humanoid puppets, which were over 5 meters tall, were not rare. They could be seen everywhere on the streets of Silvermoon City. The puppets only needed a mage apprentice to control and were quite useful. They worked without complaint and could easily lift 10-ton boulders. Arcane puppets were the ones who built the core of the sturdiest outer wall of the Watchtower. They carried the cut boulders and stacked them up one by one. A single puppet could do the work of hundreds of people for a day. Chapter 686. Unfortunately, there was a serious problem with the arcane puppet. It consumed a lot of mana. A magical jade could only allow it to work for an hour. According to the Daligen's calculations, this meant that the cost of using an arcane puppet for an hour was more than 100 gold coins. In the eyes of the allies, how was this building a city? It was like piling up gold coins on the ground and melting them. If it wasn't for Duque's confidence when the door of darkness closed, and the possibility that it would reopen within 2 years, the big shots of the alliance wouldn't even be willing to fork out so few people, not to mention the 5 million gold coins that they volunteered after seeing the scale of the project. However, seeing that Duque was the only one paying, no one dared to ask where the 5 million went and what it was used for. Anyway, all the ministers swore that if it were them, considering the harsh geological conditions and the serious supply and manpower problems, the 5 million would only be enough to build the walls of the watchtower. Barbicans, turrets, arrow towers, and the outer bastions were all out of the question, not to mention building a train station inside. Who could be like Duque, rebuilding 2 cities in one go and building a complete high-speed supply line? King Lang stood beside Duque. Now that the watchtower is built, you can breathe a sigh of relief, right? Duque nodded. You can say that. Anduin was more concerned about another problem. What if the tribe doesn't come in 2 years? I'm 90% sure that they will come. If they really don't come, I'll just let the Marcus family guard this place for generations. Duque pursed his lips. He didn't believe that the Burning Legion could wait that long. You're really willing? You're only 19 years old this year. For Azeroth. As Duque spoke calmly, the moral integrity he inherited from Alonso's fail began to echo with Duque's will, causing his body to emit a faint holy golden light. That was the will of a saint and also the will of a hero. It was as if the young Duque's soul had sublimated because of this sentence. For a moment, everyone around was filled with respect for Duque's words. Yes, for Azeroth. Lang and Anduin stretched out their right hands in unison with their palms facing down and the back of their hands facing the sky. They stacked their hands together and looked at the crowd at the same time. For Azeroth. The bronze-bearded dwarf King Magni was relatively short, and he directly grabbed the hands of the great dwarf craftsman Jerbin and his kinsman Kudrin. For Azeroth. Daelin and Salas smiled and put their hands on it. We are all doing this for Azeroth. Antonidas and Tyrrhenus placed their oldest palms on the highest point. The war was over, but a new war was bound to come. Perhaps every country had their own interests and concerns, but in the face of a huge threat that could destroy all of them, they had no choice but to ignore their differences and stand closely together. Duque also put his hand on it. Yes, let's work hard together. At this moment in the Moon Shadow Valley of Draenor, 2 figures that were short and slender compared to the orcs walked into the village of the Shadow Moon clan as if there was no one else around. Nizol? A strange shout with a certain evil aura echoed in the village. Tyron Gorefiend and Jazz Soul Shredder, who was also a first-generation Death Knight, walked on the central road of the village. Their iron leg guards, which were rarely used by orcs, kicked up a thick layer of dust under their feet. The curious orc villagers poked their heads out of the simple doors and windows of their houses to see what was going on. When they met the strange red eyes of the intruders, everyone felt a chill that seeped into their souls, and everyone was scared back. Nizol. Tyrone once again roared in a cold and discontented tone. I want to talk to you. Don't make me force you out. His shout finally had a reaction here. A few tall and burly green giants carrying heavy iron axes came behind the 2 of them. A rough voice came from behind. I don't know who you are and I don't care who you are. You are now trespassing on the territory of the Shadow Moon clan. Get out of here now or die. The Death Knight turned to the strong orc warrior who had just approached him from behind. I, Tyron Gorefiend, am looking for Nizol. Pass a message to him for me or get out of here. The orc looked a little uneasy when he heard the name. Gorefiend? You are the Death Knight? His face twisted with disgust, revealing 2 fangs. He looked at the Gorefiend and his companions, summoned up his courage and said, Don't provoke the Shadow Moon clan, or we will let you Death Knights die again. Jazz laughed. Then we really want to see how you will let us die again. Tyron nodded slightly. Suddenly, several figures walked out from the shadows of the huts in the village and came to the side of the 2 Death Knights. Although they were wearing hoods, their eyes, which shone with a strange light, were still clearly visible. Tyrone smiled while the Beastman gulped. Last chance. Hurry up and find Nizol, or your pride will let you die a miserable death. The orcs always had a kind of persistence towards their own land that was unexpected to others. Nizol won't see anyone. Although he had begun to sweat, it was clear that he was clenching the axe in his hand. Oh. Tyron sighed softly. His lungs that had long since decayed inhaled a mouthful of air and exhaled, issuing a strange whistling sound. You can die now. Without waiting for the orc to reply, Tyron stretched out his right hand, which was protected by plate armor, and chanted a spell in a low voice. The sudden pain made the orc forget to breathe and he bent over in pain. Tyron clenched his fist. At the same time, dark red blood suddenly gushed out of the orc's nose, eyes and mouth. Without staying for a second, Tyron turned and headed deeper into the village. He no longer had any interest in torturing this annoying orc. Along the way it seemed that he had killed too many of these brainless guys. Evil dark magic. A Shadow Moon warrior shouted, grabbing the battle axe beside him. Kill them. Otherwise no one will be spared. His roar was echoed by several orcs around him, and they all raised their weapons and rushed over. Tyron Gorfine turned around like lightning, his glowing eyes narrowing. Since you want to die, I'll just kill you all and find Nazul myself. Chapter 687. This time, he spread his hands forward at the same time, and the surging power of darkness condensed at his fingertips. A second later, as if a powerful mage had thrown a big fireball, the power of darkness exploded in front of the orcs like black flames, easily sending the orcs who had just rushed over waving their battle axes flying. They lay on the ground howling in pain. Stop. Enough orc blood has been shed. An old orc's voice came through the air, echoing in the ears of all the orcs and death knights. The majestic voice itself had a mysterious power that made people unconsciously obey it. Tai Long put his arms down, and the death knights retreated in unison, forming a line behind Tai Long. Every pair of scarlet eyes stared at the leader of the Shadow Moon clan who appeared in front of them. Nazul, you've finally come, Tai Long Gorfine said lazily, standing in a pool of blood. In the next moment he felt the old orc warlock's anger. The Shadow Moon clan has too many settlements, and it's too troublesome to find them one by one. I had to do this in order to get your attention. He turned to Nazul and was surprised to find that Nazul's face seemed to be smeared with a layer of white powder. It was deathly white and his whole face looked like a skull. He looked at Nazul and Nazul looked back at him. When their eyes met, Nazul's eyes widened in surprise. I dreamed of you, he muttered. In the dream I foresaw death. And now you've come. Nazul's thin and slender fingertips touched the hand-painted skull on his face, and a few white pieces peeled off. His voice seemed to have a sense of helplessness as if he had to bow to fate. For 2 years I've had the same dream. In the end you still came to take my soul. Soul? I'm not interested in your soul, and of course, I'm not a saint who came to redeem you. You're right. I did come for you but not for the reason you think. I came to ask you to stand up and lead the entire clan. Nazul looked very confused. Me? Why me? In order to bring the tribe one step closer to the abyss of destruction? Haven't I committed enough sins? Nazul's eyes were filled with unease and fear. I'm not a good tribe leader. Once upon a time, I believed in a false illusion, causing the entire tribe to fall into the flames of war, causing our world to be almost destroyed. I don't deserve to be the leader of the tribe. Please find someone else. Tai Long frowned. He had never thought that the ambitious Gul'dan's spiritual teacher would be so weak. If it was anyone else he would have killed them. He tried to persuade Nazul again. The tribe needs you. The tribe has been destroyed. Nazul interrupted him. Half of the orcs are trapped in that evil world. Most of them have left us forever. You want me to use my own strength to cross the void and become the leader of a group of dead people? Even if I can, what can I do? The light in Nazul's eyes seemed to have returned to 2 years ago, back to the horrible scene described by the defeated orcs. 200,000 orcs died in the battle, and that was not a power the orcs could resist at all. Nazul's body trembled like a sieve. The alliance is too strong. They have artillery and they have dragons. Our tribe will never win this war. The orcs' fate is already sealed. They will either be destroyed by the alliance in that world, or wait for death in this world that is gradually being destroyed. Yes, we can only choose how we die now. Tyron was almost driven mad by Nazul. He never thought that the once respected tribal chief would become so afraid of death. Saying that Nazul was weak, was already praising him. This guy was a complete coward. What was even more unfortunate was that Nazul was an absolutely necessary part of Tai Long's plan. Tai Long could no longer bear it. He grabbed Nazul's arms and shook them angrily. It's been 2 years. Ever since the collapse of the dark portal, you've been hiding like a turtle for 2 years. In this world, the clans have done nothing but kill each other for the smaller and smaller hunting grounds. Are you really willing to wait for death and despair like them? So what? Nazul roared in despair. Nazul was finally a little angry, but Tai Long was happy. He had found a breakthrough. Yes, the current Nazul was definitely a person who had abandoned his own people, lost his sense of honor, and had no sense of responsibility. But Tai Long found that he was afraid of death. If there was a weakness, it could be used. Wasn't that right? Tai Long's calmness infected Nazul. Although the dark portal was destroyed, I have absolute confidence that I can rebuild it. I will leave a spatial crack in Azeroth until the entire tribe can pass through it. Then I heard from Ghoul Dan that there are some artifacts. If we can get some of them, we don't need to defeat the Alliance because our goal is not to conquer the whole of Azeroth. Nazul stopped struggling. His face was full of confusion. If we don't conquer Azeroth, then why did we repair it? As long as we get those artifacts, then we can change the spatial coordinates of the dark portal and use it to leave Azeroth and Draenor. We can live in other worlds. Well, other better worlds. Tai Long's voice became full of temptation, like an uncle who was using a lollipop to lure a child. Nazul listened with rapt attention, and a glimmer of hope appeared on his pale face. Yes, Nazul was a guy who was afraid of death. He knew very well that entering his hut again and continuing to live in seclusion was waiting for death. Rather than that, it was better to choose to accept a new fate. Nazul finally asked, "Do you already have a comprehensive plan? I mean a comprehensive and foolproof plan." Of course. Tai Long Gorfiend tried to make himself appear full of confidence. Although this was a bit difficult for a dead person who had already lost his blood, he still tried to make the soul fire in his eyes burn brighter. This time Tai Long did not press Nazul. Instead, he waited patiently for him. "Tell me your plan." Nazul turned and walked into his hut. But this time Tai Long Gorfiend walked in with him. Other Death Knights replaced Nazul's orc guards at the door. Chapter 688. The Dark Portal, 11th of November, Hand-Chopping Day. No, it was Singles Day on Earth. It was not a holiday in Azeroth, but late at night, the atmosphere in the Overwatch stronghold was tense. It was not just the Overwatch stronghold. Almost every sentry tower near the Dark Portal was on high alert. All the soldiers would take shifts every 2 hours. "Hey, Corporal, wake up. It's level 1 combat readiness. Do you hear me?" Below the sentry tower, an Alliance officer on horseback woke up the soldiers who were dozing off. Corporal Randall laughed. "Lieutenant William, don't be so nervous. Look at the cursed land in front of us. We have been guarding it for almost 2 years, and there is nothing here that we need to seal off. Besides, isn't Pang Lei looking at it? Isn't that right, brother?" Another soldier who was on the lookout next to him responded with a "hmm." Although Second Lieutenant Williams' expression was not good, he could only agree. In the past 2 years, from the initial fear to the calm, nothing had happened here. There were no orcs, no demons, not even animals. Apart from the occasional gust of wind that would blow a relatively round rock to roll on the Crimson Land, there was not even a ghost here. But he still looked a little uncomfortable. "Randall, perhaps you are right," he admitted, wiping his face with his gloved hand. "But please be clear, even when we first arrived, Sir Marcus, the deputy commander, only gave us a level 3 combat readiness that was close to a vacation. But now it's level 1. 2 people in a team on alert at the same time, understand? From the second half of this year onwards, we can enjoy fresh seafood. What is it for? Isn't it because seafood can improve one's night vision? Otherwise, the great Lord above would not be so kind as to let me eat such fresh seafood. Alright, for the sake of the freshness of the seafood. I can't imagine that the seafood that was transported from more than 1,000 kilometers away is still alive." Randall stood up and carefully used a telescope to look at the dark portal in the distance. Thanks to the development of the military industry, the telescope that was once only available to generals was now equipped with 2 in each of the 12 watchtowers surrounding the dark portal. 2 soldiers looked ahead of them. Under the light of a brazier set in a particular place, they could still clearly make out a glimmer of light in the air behind a pile of rubble. It was very narrow, about the width of a person and the height of 2 people. They had been told that the crack was a remnant of the dark portal, and that their duty was to guard it. Second Lieutenant William left with a few patrolling soldiers. Corporal Horrell spoke up. "I have to say this job is pretty easy. You get 3 times the pay of a soldier of the same rank, and all you have to do is keep an eye on an opening that won't move. If anything happened, they could just blow the alarm and escape. And we can change shifts in an hour. William was about to say something else when he stopped. His eyes that were pressed against the binoculars suddenly widened and he whispered, "Look over there." With the light from the braziers that had been set up beforehand, they could clearly see something coming out of the distorted door of light. In the light of the fire, the shadows of those things were cast on the huge wall behind the door of light that had been set up beforehand. The huge figure with its long fangs looked especially ferocious. "Wu, did you hear that?" Horrell reminded his partner. At the same time, the green-skinned giants revealed their true faces in their field of vision. "Damn it. That's Taraja's signal. We're not seeing things. It's really the Horde. Those evil green-skinned creatures are coming." William lunged at the horn hanging on the wooden sentry tower behind him. "Woo," a bugle sounded. 2, 3, 12. Immediately after, a huge fire beacon was lit on the sentry tower a little further away, and a siren was sounded. "Woo." Every Alliance soldier on the sentry tower, after fulfilling their duty, immediately jumped off the sentry tower as fast as they could, untied the reins of their escaping horses and whipped them to escape. On the walls of Overwatch Stronghold, Turayan, Lothar's adjutant, was patrolling. Suddenly he stopped and shushed the other soldiers beside him. The group of people held their breaths and stood there for 2 seconds, trying to figure out what was going on. Then Turayan heard it. The siren in the wind sounded like the low groan of a giant beast that had just woken up. Then it immediately turned into a warning roar. "I want the magic mirror image of the dark portal." Turayan called out to the mage who was on duty. The middle-aged mage hurriedly chanted an incantation. When the mage's eye that had been arranged beforehand sent over the image, Turayan looked at the spatial crack in the image and took a deep breath. The cold wind that seeped into his lungs almost made him lose the ability to speak. The crack was expanding. "Sound the alarm. Level 1 alert, the enemy has appeared." He waved his arms in excitement, calling out to the guard on the clock tower. But the young guard was obviously a new recruit, and he actually froze in place out of fear. "For the sake of the holy light. Don't King daydream at this time?" Turayan could not hold it in any longer. He immediately pulled out the hammer at his waist and threw a hammer of wrath at the huge alarm. Hammer of Wrath did not have any special effect on creatures or inanimate objects that were in perfect condition. But as one of the few long-range attacks of a paladin, it was more or less the same as being hit by a hammer. Dang, the loud noise finally woke the guard up. He suddenly mustered all his courage and shook the hemp rope that connected the large bell like a madman. Dang, dang, dang. The bell of war rang. At the side of the command room of the watch fort, Anduin, who was in a light sleep, suddenly opened his eyes. His 2 attendants jumped up at once, and hastily tied the armor that they had prepared for their commander. When Anduin Lothar came to the command room fully armed, he found that his adjutant Turayan, Danath Trollbane, Muradin Bronzebeard, Haas, and the mage representative Krasus and a large group of people were all there. "Report the situation." Turayan looked towards the west with eyes full of admiration. That was the direction of Karazhan. Deputy Commander Marcus' prediction is completely correct. The Horde is here. The latest news from the bandits of MI7 is that there are confirmed Death Knights and more than 2,000 Horde warriors. The preliminary judgment is, listening to Turayan's report, everyone thought that the completion of the Overwatch stronghold was really timely. Chapter 689. In the cold night, the Horde warriors who had rushed out of the dark portal heard William's horn and tried to kill the Alliance guards on sentry duty. But it was too late. Yes, they had the numbers. Unfortunately, when they rushed to the tower, they stepped on something strange. It felt like a hard iron plate. The next moment, the iron plate under their feet suddenly exploded. The exploding pig iron easily tore their bodies apart. The orcs who rushed at the front immediately fell into a pool of blood. It was late at night, and darkness covered the entire cursed land. The orc warriors could not see their enemies. Just as they were still walking around the dark portal, looking for the human sentries who had escaped, a few muffled sounds came from the darkness. Then a dazzling light shot into the air and slowly floated down, exposing all the orcs near the dark portal to the light. The human thieves in the darkness could clearly see the orc warriors and death knights coming out of the newly expanded crack. But the thieves did not take any further action, allowing the orc tribe to control the dark portal on the side of Azeroth. Just 10 minutes later, Karazhan received a message. The one who received the magic message was Jaina, who was on duty for the second half of the night. Magic messages were also a part of magic. Even mages could not receive magic messages in their sleep, because dreams were Isra's domain. And whether Duque was asleep or not, he refused all magic messages at night. If they wanted to find Duque, they could only send a message through the mages on duty in Karazhan. Jaina rubbed her eyebrows with her slender hands. Even if I'm still a girl, staying up late is still the enemy of beauty. Jaina tilted her head and looked at herself in the mirror. Well, at 15 years old she was even more beautiful. Her brilliant golden hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall. Her beautiful oval face had a mysterious aura, and it seemed that as her magic increased, her breasts became more prominent. Jaina knew very well how tempting she was. It's a pity that my horrible teacher only orders me around like an apprentice. Jaina spat harshly before standing up and walking out of the library. She quickly climbed the 3-story spiral staircase and headed for Duque's bedroom on the top floor of the Magus Tower. Before she reached the door, the voice that drifted out from the crack of the door made Jaina's cheeks burn. I can't take it anymore. Duque's godly sword is too mighty. I can't take it anymore. Go look for Sasha. This was the voice of Aurelia, the eldest sister of the Windrunner family, who usually appeared to be noble and elegant. Sasha is sleeping soundly. Please do not disturb her. This weak voice naturally came from his third sister, Sasha. Little Gianna is outside. She must have something important to do. Aurelia tried to divert Duque's attention. Since she had been exposed, Jaina could only brace herself and knock on the door. Knock knock. After that, Jaina said, Teacher Duque, there's news from the watchtower. The door of darkness has reopened. At this time that bastard Duque's voice floated out. Okay, got it. Tell Lothar that everything will go according to plan. After saying that, Aurelia's surprised voice rang out again. Obviously, that bastard Duque had started fighting again. Jaina was stunned. That's it? That's it? That's the third battle of the Door of Darkness. The Alliance's warriors are probably fighting on the front lines right now. You still have the nerve to mess around here? By the way, have you even considered the feelings of the rumored fiancé of the legendary Grand Duke Marcus? Do you really think I'm dead? Jaina gritted her teeth in hatred. Unfortunately, even if Duque did not say it, she knew that Duque was really determined not to marry her. It was not until Jaina was far away from the door that Duque said, Oh, sorry, I didn't pay attention just now. Jaina, you should sleep too. From tonight onwards, you don't have to be on duty anymore. We should focus on fighting the enemy. Karazhan is also the main battlefield. This is also the main battlefield? Who is the enemy? Jaina was a smart girl. She was also quite aware of the big picture. It was precisely because of this characteristic that she was fooled by Duque. She diverted her attention from this small problem, that Duque did not want her, and chose the Windrunner sisters. She had been with Duque for almost 2 years. Although she was a magic apprentice, she grew very quickly. Not only did she advance from the earth level to the sky level as a mage, but she also became a commander. Everything that Duque had done in the past 2 years made Jaina extremely curious. No, it should be said that everything that Duque did aroused Jaina's curiosity. Whether it was the seemingly unconstrained and self-contained planned economic system that operated perfectly, or the long supply line that seemed to exist to prove Duque's foresight time and time again, it all proved that everything that Duque did had a clear goal, and the things that he worried about would definitely come true. For example, when Jaina personally asked the strongest mage in the Alliance, Antonidas, about the reopening of the Dark Portal, he only gave a vague idea that it might open again in 5 years. This was a completely different concept from the 2 years that Duque had been waiting for. It was not 2 years. Or rather, it should be said that Duque had already accurately reached the 2 months. As Duque's disciple and secretary, the order that the Watchtower would enter a level 1 state of alert starting in November was also passed on by Duque. On the surface, Duque was like a very clear and easy-to-read book. He finished reading it in a few seconds. Every action and every step of his seemed very simple, but when all of Duque's actions were combined together, no one could understand it. Even if Jaina did not want to admit it, she had to admit that there were still many things that she could learn from Duque. One day, I will learn everything from you and then teach you a good lesson. At the same time, the Alliance was teaching the Horde how to behave. The original Alliance was not good at fighting at night. At night, all formations and commands would be severely discounted, and the influence of the orcs at night was not as great as that of the humans. And the Death Knights, who did not need to use their eyes to see people, and could only rely on their souls to judge the other party, were even less affected. But now, it was indeed the Alliance who was teaching the Horde orcs how to behave. This was not the first time that Noxus had wanted to ask, can we hit the Dark Portal like a blind man? However, Muradin told Noxus in a very professional manner, Duque has set the shooting parameters for all the cannons in the fortress. The shooting parameters are the shooting parameters that the cannons must hit the enemy. Seeing that Anduin Lothar was still confused, Muradin scratched his head. Anyway, even if it's night, as long as the cannons are aimed at this preset angle, they will definitely hit. Don't worry about it, you'll know once you fire. In the next moment, the 36 Longsong cannons roared in unison. Chapter 690. Whoosh! An ear-piercing whistling sound came from afar, as if the Grim Reaper was swooping down from the sky. The orc warriors who came to Azeroth for the first time did not know what was going on. The moonlight was not bright that night, so they could only look around foolishly. However, Kilrog Deadeye, the chieftain of the Blood Ring clan who had experienced the battle at Blackrock Tower in the Scorching Canyon, had a drastic change in expression. His wrinkled face scrunched up in horror. He shouted at the top of his lungs, "Fire! Spread out! Get down!" Then he hid behind the dark portal. What the hell was firing? The rookie orc warriors did not understand, but the veteran orc beside him did. Not to mention the veteran orcs, even the Death Knights who were unafraid of normal physical attacks had to crawl on the ground in the face of this apocalyptic power, curling up like a porcupine. Only the foolish new recruits remained where they were, not knowing what to do. Some of them spread their legs as if they wanted to run out of this dangerous area. There were even some who raised their wooden shields in an attempt to block the projectiles that were, in theory, javelins and axes. Everything was in vain. They knew that the orcs would come out from the dark portal again. For 2 years, the promised battle in the field had been turned into a turret defense game. Did they really think that the crazy Duque would not do anything? No. Good. After calculating the distance between the dark portal and the historical watchtower, Duque first discovered a serious problem. The cursed land was like a kettle, surrounded by steep mountains that were difficult to climb. The original location was next to the only exit. Anyone who wanted to leave the cursed land would have to go through the double baptism of cannon fire and arrows. Moreover, the watchtower was built at the highest point of the mountain. Anyone who wanted to attack it would have to go through a painful attack. It seemed good, but the original location of the watchtower was too far from the dark portal, so far that the cannon fire of this era could not reach it. This was an absolute disadvantage. Duque also understood that using magic near the dark portal was suicidal. Once the chaotic magic energy affected the cracks in space, both sides would be doomed. Therefore, Duque's response was to expand the watchtower. It turned out that the historical Overwatch stronghold only had a single layer of walls. Moreover, when Nazul led the orcs through the dark portal for the second time, the Overwatch stronghold was only the lowest level of stone castles. It was not the complete structure that was 30 years later. Duque had used the arcane puppet to speed up and change everything. The watch fortress in this world was at least 10 times larger than before. Furthermore, it had 3 concentric circles with 3 layers of walls. The innermost circle was naturally the original location of the Overwatch fortress. It stood on top of a mountain and overlooked the entire cursed land. The center circle was divided into 2 parts. Near the Swamp of Sorrows, there was a huge train yard and a series of temporary unloading yards. Close to the dark portal was a barbican-like defensive area, with a large number of inhumane defensive devices installed, such as small mage towers that specialized in enhancing a mage's magic power. The outermost ring was the layered bombardment field that occupied more than a quarter of the cursed land. There were a total of 7 levels, and between each level was a stone wall that was over 5 meters tall. Equipped with standard arrow towers, firing holes, and a large number of mortars, it was enough to equip 5,000 soldiers. The distance between each level was about 300 meters. The 36 Longsong cannons were actually railway cannons, installed on the train skin on the tracks. Behind each Longsong cannon was a locomotive. Once the front line fell, the cannon would be pulled back along the tracks by the train. Of course, apart from the locomotive, there was also a capstan for pulling and a handrail for pushing the cart. If necessary, the dwarf cannoneers and soldiers could push the cannons back with manpower. The tracks extended all the way into the watch fortress. As long as they could be pulled back in time, they could be reinstalled on the cannons of the watch fortress and transformed into Longsong cannons. These Longsong cannons could be said to be the pinnacle of this era. Ha! Blast them to death. Go. Big steel cannon. Muradin laughed maniacally. The cannon that was 6 meters long and had a diameter of about 1.2 meters was called small steel cannon. Therefore, this cannon that was fixed on the train had a length of 10 meters, a diameter of 1.5 meters, and could fire a distance of 3 kilometers was called big steel cannon. When Noxus heard the deafening sound of the cannon firing from several kilometers away, not only did his eyelids twitch wildly, even his heart was about to jump out of his chest. Only the fanatical dwarves with earplugs were jumping around the cannon, as if they were celebrating Midsummer Day. That's right. They couldn't improve the quality of the steel, but they had to increase the range and power, so they had to make the cannon barrel bigger and thicker. Originally, only a dwarf in the state of descended deity could lift the cannon, but now it would take 2 descended deity dwarves. But it didn't matter as long as it worked. The only problem was that due to time constraints, not all 36 Longsong cannons were big steel cannons. 30 of them were the small steel cannons that had been used in the Battle of Black Rock Mountain. However, when the 36 cannons fired at the same time, everyone only had one feeling: God. Bang. Crack. Crack. Although many of the Longsong cannons were installed with recoil mechanisms, due to installation errors and other reasons, the rails under the cannons were destroyed in an instant. A large group of bronze-bearded dwarves had no choice but to transform, forcibly lifting the Longsong cannons out and placing them on the relatively intact rails at the back. But thinking about it, just the recoil alone was so terrifying. How shocking would the power of the blast be? That's right. This was the judgment of the Alliance. This was the roar of the Grim Reaper. This was the arrival of the apocalypse. More than 80% of the 5,000 tribal elites that came out of the Door of Darkness flew into the sky immediately. Of course, the orcs and death knights couldn't fly. In the form of corpses, they were blasted hundreds of meters into the air, exploding into thousands of flesh and bone parts, and then scattered irregularly over an area of several square kilometers. Not being blasted into the sky didn't mean that they were spared death. Many orcs that were slightly further away from the Door of Darkness were hit by the indescribably huge impact, and their internal organs were shattered, blood spurting out of their mouths and noses as they died. Only those who were truly far enough away, or like Kilrog, hid behind the Door of Darkness. Those who were lucky enough to escape death didn't have it easy either. Many people felt that the world was silent, and no matter how much they screamed, they couldn't hear any echo, because they were deaf. Looking at the orc vanguard that was completely annihilated by a round of cannon fire, Nazul, who had sacrificed the Void Demon in exchange for an extremely strong defense, was so scared that he peed his pants. No, it shouldn't be like this. It can't be like this. How could we possibly win against such a terrifying alliance? No. I want to go back. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go back. Anduin Lothar, who saw all this through the binoculars and the mage's eye, made a rare witty remark. What did Duque say? 10,000 taels of gold when the cannons are fired? Although I don't know what 10,000 taels of gold is, remember to send the bill to His Majesty Tarinas. Chapter 691. After Anduin finished sending the bill, the commanders around him smiled bitterly. What kind of business is this? Why does it sound like the heroes who guard the borders for the Alliance have become profiteers? Yet no one had any objections. Because the Rotterdam Kingdom had not been kind in the past 2 years. At the end of the day, it was all because of Alterac. Since they had fallen out with each other, the Rotterdam Kingdom bought and annexed Alterac's land in both official and unofficial forms. The Bara family's land was confiscated by the Alliance. However, the rich Rotterdam Kingdom chose to compensate the surrounding countries with money when it came to distributing the confiscated land. They kept the land prices low while exerting all kinds of political pressure. As a result, the entire Alterac Mountains were now under the Rotterdam Kingdom. Only Stanbrad, Icewind Ridge, and Hillsbrad Hills belonged to the nobles of the Rotterdam Kingdom for the time being. To everyone's surprise, Duque did not bother with the Rotterdam Kingdom on the Alterac Mountains at all. It was as if he had acquiesced to the Rotterdam Kingdom's misdeeds. No one thought that retribution would come so soon. Anduin took out a letter that Duque had written a long time ago and read it. The Alliance's highest command has informed the Rotterdam Kingdom that the Horde army broke through the Door of Darkness at 4 in the morning and is attacking the watchtower where the Southern Army is stationed. The Horde's attack is fierce, and we have retaliated with heavy cannons. We have wiped out more than 5,000 Horde soldiers in half an hour. To prevent the Horde's million-strong army from breaking through the watchtower and sailing north from the Swamp of Sorrows to the sea-watching cliff of the hinterlands, we are requesting your country to fulfill its responsibility as the leader of the Alliance and allocate 5 million gold coins. The commanders covered their mouths and laughed after hearing it. Damn it, is this a notice? This is clearly a blackmail letter. Clearly telling the Rotterdam Kingdom that the war has started, and this place is too far away from you. You don't have to send troops, but you have to give me double the money. Otherwise, don't blame me for not having the money to buy cannons. Geographically speaking, the alliance was not weak at all. Because even if the Overwatch stronghold fell, there was still the newly established Riedridge Mountain stronghold at the front line of the Riedridge Mountain. Ryan personally led 70% of the Stormwind Kingdom's military forces, in addition to Reginald Windsor's Duke private army, which totaled to 120,000 soldiers. Someone asked if the Horde would attack Upwind Trail? The entire Headwind Trail was within the attack range of the Karazhan Mage Tower. In terms of magical defense, Karazhan and the Well of the Sun had the same level of defense at this time. They were even stronger than the Dalajan and Silvery Moon City. Hence, the biggest possibility of the fall of the Watchtower was what Anduin had said just now. The tribe would cross the sea and attack the hinterlands. If that was the case, who would be the one kneeling? It was either Rotterdam or Kuel Salis. In fact, when Tyrrhenus was woken up in the middle of the night, he was very upset. But when he saw the orc limbs flying in the air in the magic mirror, he was silent for a long time. That's right. The Horde was back. Looking at the map that Anduin had attached, and judging from the tribe's battle flags, Tyrrhenus could feel his stomach hurting. There were nearly 10 first-class tribes and clans written on it. Knowing that it was Duque who was robbing them, Tyrrhenus could only pinch his nose and accept it. Of course, the most infuriating thing was Duque's reminder. We will definitely attack the Horde at the Watchtower, but please be careful. According to the information provided by the Alliance's captives, the Alliance Command believes that the Warsong clan in the Tirisful Woodland and the Frostwolf clan in the Alterac Mountains, a first-class clan, will respond to the Horde's attack. Seeing this, Tyrrhenus had the urge to jump into Lake Lord Emir. *CK The Warsong clan had not been completely wiped out after 2 years. That was enough to give him a headache. Where did the first-class Frostwolf clan come from? When did this information come from? Tyrrhenus would not believe it even if he was beaten to death. This was the information he had just received. Needless to say, Duque obviously knew about it a long time ago. He didn't say it when Rotterdam took over the Alterac Mountains, and only revealed it when the Horde attacked. Alright, there were 2 first-class tribes in his backyard. Even if they were half dead when the Horde's army arrived, the Rotterdam kingdom would be destroyed. Was this a blackmail letter from the front line? No. This was a scumbag blackmail letter with extra information. Tyrrhenus slammed the armrest of his throne 3 times with all his might. Even the ministers at the foot of the throne could feel the tremors. His confidant, Duke Charmas, whispered, "We have to pay for this and not just the amount." Yes. Send my orders to double the reward to the Alliance Command Center. Let's use the Rotterdam Kingdom's treasury first. Then whoever takes Alterac Mountains land will be split according to their shares. Double was 10 million gold coins. Even Duke Charmas, who was used to seeing big scenes, could not help but grit his teeth when he heard this. They did not believe that Duque would give up on the watchtower that he had spent so much effort to build, but Rotterdam could not afford to gamble. Actually, 10 million gold coins was not that much for Duque. In order to upgrade their technology, the bronze-bearded dwarves, who were the main suppliers of raw materials and workers, were actually selling everything they had. If they did not build the watchtower and the Riedridge Mountain Fortress, they would first have to kneel to Stormwind and Cosmodan. Duque was a kind person. Since the bronze-bearded dwarves were so determined to support Stormwind, how could Duque let Magni suffer losses? Less than 5 minutes after the news of Rotterdam's promise of 10 million gold coins, Duque sent Magni an arms purchase order that was worth 5 million gold coins and was 200 pages long. In order to fulfill their duties as allies, the cannons, ammunition, soldiers and workers provided by the Iron Furnace Castle were all free of charge. Now in this order, Duque doubled the cost that Magni told Duque, and added a 0 before the decimal point to purchase. In the end, it was Magni who was kind enough, or perhaps he felt that it was too shameless to earn so much, that he waved his pen and said, "For the Alliance, I'll give you a 50% discount." On the other side, the Horde had no idea that there was such an exciting game within the Alliance. The Horde's vanguard almost peed their pants. Nazul panicked and wanted to run back, but he was grabbed by the Death Knight Tyren Gorefiend. "Idiot. Calm down. It's too late. The dark portal has already been opened, and we have already angered the Alliance. If we go back like this, the Alliance will only rush into our world and kill us all. Completing the mission is more important." Mission. Do we still have hope? Yes. Your hope is me. A sudden voice interrupted, and it was in a strange orc language. Nazul looked in the direction of the voice and saw a cold-looking human standing in the middle of the Death Knights near him. Chapter 692. The Alliance's cannons bombarded the north side of the Door of Darkness, causing the earth to shake and the mountains to shake. However, the south side was still and calm as if nothing had happened. This was because the dark portal itself was a strange existence that reinforced the crack in space. In a sense, the dark portal itself did not exist on planet Azeroth. It was a completely different dimension of matter. So even if the Alliance bombarded it with 10,000 artillery shells, it would not be able to shake the dark portal. Duque had also thought about ambushing the dark portal from 10 sides, so that every tribe that came out would die. The ideal was beautiful, but the reality was cruel. In these 2 years he could indeed arrange it like this. The problem was that the Alliance's only supply route was in the north. If the clock was based on 12 o'clock, then if the defensive line was arranged in a circular manner, once the 3 and 9 o'clock directions were forcibly cut off by the tribe, then all the Alliance defenders in the south would die. So Duque had to let go of the south side of the cursed land. Now, when Nizul and Tyren Gorfiend changed the direction of the dark portals opening from north to south, the newly arrived tribal soldiers barely avoided being bombarded. Of course, the saturation attack that was like an earthquake still made the tribal warriors tremble in fear. They could have taken a breather, but the sudden appearance of a black-haired man who looked like a human noble scared Nizul's soul away. He thought of a possibility. Did this bastard Tyren sell him to the Alliance? Fortunately, in the next moment, the black-haired man's actions made him understand the man's identity. Ha! There was a light shout. Then there was a supreme and terrifying pressure. Under Nizul's gaze, the man's figure became bigger and bigger. In just the blink of an eye, his figure had covered the entire sky in Nizul's field of vision. That was an incomparably huge black dragon. The huge horns, the hard scales, the thick and unshakable stratum corneum, the powerful wings, and the incomparably sharp claws all shook the hearts of Nizul and all the other orc chieftains. What was going on? At this time, a creepy dry palm rested on Nizul's shoulder. Nizul turned his head and saw Tyren's stiff face, which seemed to be mocking him. Nizul, he is the perfect plan I was talking about. What a bombshell. Compared to him, the 1-ton artillery shells that the Alliance threw out were just mediocre toys. If it stood on the tribe's side, there was no need to worry about failure. The Alliance would never have thought that their heavy artillery bombardment would instead become the perfect cover for the Black Dragon's descent. A huge explosion and a cloud of dust covered the sky, making it impossible to see anything from the north. In fact, in order to avoid accidental injuries, MI7's bandit spies had all retreated. The gigantic black dragon that seemed to cover the entire sky transformed once again. This time he was very slow as he folded his wings and once again became that cultured and elegant human male nobleman. Tyrone walked forward and bowed respectfully to the human who had transformed into a black dragon. He then turned to Nizul, Kilrogg, Kargath, and the other chiefs and said, "Please allow me to introduce to all the chiefs of the tribe that this is our strongest ally in Azeroth, the leader of the Black Dragon Army, Lord Nefarian." Kilrogg and Kargath frowned at the same time. Kilrogg seemed to have thought of something and chose to remain silent. However, Kargath, whose personality was more irritable, bluntly said, "Hey! Wait. Why do I remember when the leader of the Black Dragon Army died?" Suddenly, without any warning, Kargath's entire body flew out with blood spurting from his nose and mouth. No one saw how Nefarian made his move, but it was obvious that this Mr. Black Dragon was in a very bad mood. His voice was still full of elegance, but there was a hint of anger in it. The era of Nethario, the Wings of Death, has passed. Now, the leader of the Black Dragon Army is me, the great Black Dragon King, Nefarian. If Duque was here, Duque would definitely be extremely surprised. In the past, when he read novels, it was always the boss who beat up the kid. Now, he thought of a way to get rid of his old man, but the result was that the equally ambitious former Black Dragon Prince, Nefarian, took over. In a sense, the Alliance was at an advantage because in terms of strength, Nefarian was not just a street away from his old man. From another perspective, the Alliance suffered a great loss. This was because Duque, the mastermind of the Alliance, did not know that Nefarian would jump out at this time. This was truly something that exceeded their expectations. In a situation where the big shots of the Alliance generally trusted Duque, Duque's flawless plan just had to make a mistake. This could very well be fatal. After Nefarian slightly punished Kargath Bladefist for not having eyes, he gently raised his hand. The beastmen suddenly realized that the sky was once again covered with shadows. Nizul and the others suddenly raised their heads and saw that further south, along with the hazy moonlight, something was approaching. Nazul discovered that there were some orange light spots flashing in the shadows that were gradually becoming larger, and they slowly turned into diamond-like shapes. Kilrog's single eye opened wide, and he realized that those orange flashes were the scorching magma flowing out of the beast's mouth, and that the deafening noise was the sound of huge wings flapping. That was an uncountable number of black dragons. The dragons swooped down, and every beastman warrior looked on in awe. When they landed, the ground beneath their feet trembled. Hot liquid flames fell from their mouths. Their glossy black scales shimmered under the starlight, and their huge claws were like polished steel. These black dragons stood on the ground or on huge rocks. For the beastmen, they had already become one with the earth, becoming huge stone statues. They were all living and incomparably deadly existences. When all the dragons had landed, they retracted their huge dragon wings and stared at the beastmen in front of them with their ebony eyes. Their heads and tails were gently swaying, and the dragon teeth in their scarlet mouths crisscrossed chaotically. From time to time, because of the friction, they would make frightening scratching sounds. The beastmen were brave. But that bravery also had a limit. For them, they could launch a suicidal charge against the human battle formation that was 10 times their size without hesitation. But they did not dare to raise the axe in their hands against the dragon army that was only 1% of their size. The feeling of being stared at by the dragons was terrible. This feeling was like a cat carefully studying its prey before eating it. Almost every beastman could not help but shiver. "My subordinates are here," Nefarian said to everyone. His tone was filled with obvious pride. The strongest creature in the entire world of Azeroth. Chapter 693. Nefarian said loudly that dragons were the strongest creatures in Azeroth. One had to know that these tribes were all country bumpkins. Before they had seen the crazy elemental lords, the titans, and the even crazier ancient gods, his words could really scare the country bumpkins. Nefarian's vanity was greatly satisfied by the orc's expressions that clearly said, "You're right, we admire you." He pointed to a particularly large black dragon with 2 huge horns on its forehead. "Sabrian." When he called out the black dragon's name, the other black dragons all lowered their heads. "He's my first lieutenant. He's in charge of all matters. He and a few other companions will carry your orcs to the island you mentioned. As for the trip to Dalajan, I'll personally bring you there." None of the orcs or death knights dared to disobey Nefarian's words. Using the demon's soul to control a dragon aspect, or even an entire dragon legion, was already in the past 2 years ago. If grass could grow on Zuluhid's grave, it would be at least a foot tall. In fact, the corpse of the former Dragon Maw chief was pushed into the middle of the scorching canyon along with the remains of the 200,000 orcs by the Alliance's logistics team. It was the lava fissure that the giant fire elemental Baron Geddon had emerged from. The orcs only quietly sensed and feared the power contained in every simple word of the giant dragon king that had taken human form. They watched curiously and attentively as Nefarian bypassed their new chief and directly gave orders to each of the chiefs. Compared to his father, the former Black Dragon Prince, the current Black Dragon King Nefarian seemed to know more about the way of commanding his subordinates. Blindly pressuring them would not be able to exchange for loyalty. Even so-called obedience would be greatly reduced. Nefarian's masculine lips curled up slightly. He spoke again. "Of course, I have no intention of becoming your master. Your strong request is an exception. Now we can only be called, so-called allies with the same interests." His words immediately made the tribal chiefs feel much better. Nefarian's smile became even more mysterious. "You won't be the only opponents of the Alliance. The Black Dragon Legion will lead you to the Tirisful Glades to find Grom Helroar's Warsong clan. At the same time, I will let Brother Blackhand's Blacktooth clan dispatch troops from the Burning Steppes to attack the Reedridge Mountain and attack the Alliance's retreat." Blackhand brothers? Brendan Mame? Nazul was stunned by this unexpected news. Yes. After completing the quest from Great Chief Orgrim in the Mausoleum of Sargeras in the Endless Sea, they came to Blackrock Mountain and foolishly occupied Blackrock Stronghold. If I hadn't shown them the right way, they would have been dead by now. Now they are my servants. Nefarian raised his chin arrogantly. This was definitely great news for the main force of the Horde trapped in the Cursed Lands. After all, there was nothing in the Cursed Lands apart from the red soil that had lost its vitality. Even the supplies had to be transported over from Draenor. Nazul really couldn't imagine what would happen if there were hundreds of thousands of beastmen crowded here. Perhaps the Alliance wouldn't even need to destroy them. They would starve to death here or kill each other, leading to destruction. However, Nefarian's gift wasn't limited to this. Like a magic trick, he took out an item from his interspatial storage bag. When the tribal chiefs saw this thing under the hazy moonlight, they couldn't help but exclaim in unison. What did they see? The head of the great traitor of the Horde, the former warlock King Ghoul, Dan, who was believed to have directly caused the defeat of the Alliance in the war against the Alliance. His sinister face was still frozen with a horrified expression. His life, his sins, his self-inflicted suffering, all stopped at the moment before his death. Looking at his expression, one could completely imagine the huge gap of loss and panic when he confidently wanted to steal the power of the fallen titan Sargeras, only to suffer the fiercest backlash of the demon tide. No one knew how Nefarian did it, but in any case, Ghoul, Dan's head didn't have any decay, and was presented in front of the Horde in its entirety. Can I see this traitor's head? Of course. Nefarian casually tossed Ghoul, Dan's head to the ground like a bag of garbage. Several Beastman Kiliarchs lit torches to make the scene more obvious. The tribal chiefs of the first-rate clans gathered in a circle and watched with angry expressions. It's him. It's definitely him. That unfilial disciple of mine? Ha. Ghoul, Dan. You also got your retribution. Is this what you'll get in the end? Ah. As Ghoul, Dan's former master, Nazul had the absolute right to decide on the head. For a moment, the tribal chiefs burst into enthusiastic cheers. If they hadn't been beaten like dogs by the Alliance half an hour ago, they really wanted to hold a grand bonfire party to celebrate Ghoul, Dan's death. Final end. No. Obviously, this great traitor of the Horde can still atone for his crimes in his own unique way. Nefarian's bewitching voice gave Nazul a premonition that he couldn't refuse his next proposal. Nefarian pointed in the air, and Ghoul, Dan's hideous head began to rapidly wither under the watchful eyes of all the tribal chiefs. The few hairs were the first to dry up and turn into ashes that dissipated into the air. Then, the skin and scalp attached to the skull, as well as the shriveled brain, began to fall to the ground piece by piece. Finally, what appeared in front of everyone was a hideous white-brown beastman skull. However, the thick evil and dark aura that wrapped around the skull told everyone how powerful the owner of the skull was when he was alive. This is... Nazul's hands were trembling. Since this is a divine weapon made from Ghoul, Dan's head, you can call it Ghoul, Dan's skull. The Black Dragon King Nefarian's smile became even wider. Ah. Nazul couldn't hold it in anymore and raised the Ghoul, Dan's skull, high up in the air as he laughed maniacally. My disciple. Is this what you'll get? Even in death you will continue to fight for the Horde. Ah. Not only Nazul, but the other tribal chiefs also laughed as if they had gotten their revenge. When the orcs finished celebrating, Nefarian waved his hand. Go. Nazul, the third thing you want is in Karazhan. Use your new divine weapon to destroy that weak human brat, Duke Marcus. Of course. I will go. Nazul's old body seemed to have become younger with the support of this new powerful force. Chapter 694. The night grew darker. After confirming that the tribe had hidden to the south of the dark portal, Lothar ordered a halt to the bombardment that had lasted for half an hour. First, there were no more targets to bomb. Second, the most threatening shots were enough. Third, Muradin also said that if this continued, the first thing that would collapse would be the overheated cannons. Forcing the cannons to cool down would only make the quality of the cannons more likely to explode. In order to satisfy the power and range, the inhumane dwarves made the cannons very exaggerated. Of course, it would be even more exaggerated when the cannons exploded. This meant that it was very likely that an entire elite artillery team would be wiped out. Anduin sent out the largest team of bandits and a team of rangers led by Servanas to monitor the tribe. Pass the order, divide the soldiers into 4 groups and take turns until dawn. The flying soil and smoke gradually subsided, replaced by a veritable darkness. Standing on the city wall, Anduin gazed at the indescribable darkness that seemed to be dancing in the distance. Everything was basically the same as the plan had imagined. Anduin still had a faint sense of uneasiness. He fell into deep thought, thinking about the tribe's next move. The others were smart enough to keep silent. The only sounds that could be heard were the crackling of the flames and the occasional whispers of others. Suddenly there was a sound in the darkness. Everyone jumped up and the tension was like a taut bowstring. What's that sound? Turalian was the most sensitive. Damn it. It's a dragon. Kudrin Wildhammer was not here. The commander of the 500 Griffin Knights was a distant relative of Kudrin, Farron, and his official rank was the Brigadier General of the Alliance. Are you sure? Anduin asked nervously. I swear by Mother Earth. I've been fighting with these guys for almost a year. I'd even wake up when I hear the sound of their wings when I'm sleeping. That's right. It's a dragon. Another Griffin Knight commander, Bephalon, answered with the same certainty. Holy light above, where did the tribe get a dragon? Didn't the Red Dragon Legion return to neutrality? Turalian asked. Only Krasis' face turned green. Only dragons knew dragons the best. Although he was a red dragon who spent most of his time in the human world, his exaggerated age gave him no lack of experience in this area. He said with absolute certainty, it's not a red dragon. It's a black dragon. Krasis could tell just by listening to the sound of the dragon's wings. This was unimaginable to humans. It's like looking at a bunch of poodles. If they're all about the same size, you really can't tell the difference between them. But they knew what they were doing. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. The Black Dragon army joined the war between the Alliance and the Horde? Krasis' face was indescribably calm. If the Black Dragon Legion dares to come out on their own, then they will be seeking their own death. That's right. Nesario had been executed. But now, the Black Dragon army was still listed as an enemy by the Dragon Slumber Shrine. The world of Azeroth was so big that it would not be easy to find the Black Dragons if they wanted to hide. If they officially joined the Horde and started a war against the Alliance, it would be a different story. The four-colored dragons, whose claws had long since been polished until they were shining, would definitely not mind giving their former compatriots and traitors the most vicious blows. I need a magic message to see if I can contact the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, Krasis said. Her Majesty Alexstrasza, is she busy now? Anduin asked slightly nervously. Whether there was the Red Dragon Legion as backup was crucial to the Alliance. Krasis had a slightly strange look on his face. I'm not too sure, but I heard that she is not in the Dragon Slumber Shrine at the moment. The long night finally passed and the sky was just beginning to brighten. The big shots of the Alliance were all stunned by the scene in front of them. With the Door of Darkness in the east and west as the dividing line, the north was full of densely packed shell craters. The south was almost intact because a large number of large and small spatial rifts had appeared on the dividing line, and demonic creatures were constantly coming out of them. The total number of demons was not too many, probably around 1,000. From imps to void demons, from hellhounds to demon guards, they basically included all the types of demons in the middle and lower levels of the Burning Legion. The demonic creatures did not seem to have any intention of attacking. They just wandered around the spatial rift. But this was enough to make the stealth of the Alliance bandits meaningless. The senses of demonic creatures and ordinary creatures were completely different things. After several elite bandits were killed by the demonic creatures, MI7 had no choice but to give up the idea of further investigating the situation of the tribe. This was just the beginning. The Alliance soon discovered that the tribe had also begun to dig up the terrifying red soil of the cursed land along the dividing line. They piled up the soil into mountains, looking like they were going to make a long wall and confront the Alliance until the end of time. What the hell are those green skins doing? That night, a sharp wail pierced through the silent Dalajan sky. Antonidas, who was discussing the situation of the tribe and the Alliance with Kale, jumped up. It was the sound of a magic alarm. Antonidas immediately recognized the source of it. Mysterious treasure room. He had clearly been warned by Duque, and he had also strengthened the defenses of the treasure room. He did not expect that it would still be invaded. Kale, eyes widened. The expression on his face at the moment was filled with surprise and shock, just like his mood. The mysterious treasure room was located in the center of Violet Castle. It was protected by the most powerful magic that mages had ever invented. There were many divine artifacts hidden inside, as well as some items that mages could not use but could not risk letting fall into the hands of others, such as magic artifacts. In terms of defense, it was definitely not inferior to Silvermoon City's Sunstrider Royal Treasury. How is this possible? Kale, muttered in his heart. He stretched out his hand for Antonidas to grasp. Without the authority of the chairman, no one could even think about teleporting in. It should have been like this. The two of them teleported to the mysterious treasure room without a word. The world around them began to blur, and Antonidas' comfortable room with its walls lined with books disappeared, replaced by a huge stone chamber. Within the area illuminated by the firelight, a man stood amidst the countless treasures. He had shiny black hair, a strong and tall figure, and a chiseled yet elegant face. Even for Kale, the elf prince who was very picky about his appearance, this human in front of him could be considered very handsome. Chapter 695. He wore finely tailored clothes and an undamaged, gem-studded longsword hung at his side. His face was slightly twisted with contempt. The man brushed his sleeves as if he wanted to wipe something off. Both he and Antonidas saw through the appearance and saw the essence of the man. They both cried out in unison. Black Dragon? Nethario? Antonidas could not be blamed for mistaking him for someone else. He could only blame the man in front of him for being almost identical to the former Lord of Pristos. However, unlike the Lord of Pristos, the man in front of him did not conceal his dragon aura at all. No, this was not concealment. This was showing off and showing off. He was younger and more arrogant. The floor and walls of the treasure room were roughly chiseled from the solid rock strata of the earth, and the ceiling was arched. There were no windows in the room and only one door. Apart from the empty space near the exit, the rest of the room was filled with partitions, boxes, and bookcases, all of which were filled with various treasures. Amidst the dust and those items, a few people stood. Although they were in human form, Antonidas' senses detected the black aura surrounding them. But before they turned around and revealed their shining eyes under their hoods, Antonidas already knew their identities. They were the terrifying existences that once gave the Alliance the most headaches in the Horde. It was unknown whether they should be included in the biological domain, the Death Knights. Now, several Death Knights surrounded the Black Dragon who had transformed into a human man like stars surrounding the moon. This terrible situation made Antonidas, a Breaking Dawn Archmage, panic. This great existence in front of me is the new king of the Black Dragons, Nefarian. Old man, don't mistake him for someone else. Tyran Gorfiend cackled. Nefarian? Compared to his father, Nesario, Nefarian's reputation was definitely much worse. Kill, that's just frowned deeply. Only Antonidas, who had come into contact with countless confidential information, knew that Nefarian had a completely different way of doing things from his father. Rather than saying that Nefarian was a dragon, it would be better to say that he was an absolute anomaly among the dragons. There were rumors that Nefarian was collecting the corpses of different types of dragons. Compared to the capricious dragon king like Nesario who still solved problems with power, Nefarian's approach was more far-sighted and mysterious. Antonidas did not know what Nefarian's high-profile appearance in the Dalajan's top-secret treasure vault meant, but the uneasiness in his heart reached its peak when Nefarian gently lifted the item in his hand. The light reflected off its facets and illuminated the entire room. Antonidas obviously knew what kind of treasure could make the Death Knights and even the Black Dragon King ignore the other treasures. Unfortunately, even though he knew that the other party was here for that thing, Antonidas still held on to the last sliver of hope. Until this moment, the Eye of the Dalajan? Antonidas shouted with all his might. With boundless anger and the self-confidence of being on the home ground of the Dalajan, Antonidas fought with all his might. In an instant, he raised one hand and cast a mysterious charm. With the other hand he summoned the other members of the Kirin Tor. The Kirin Tor chairman never fought alone. Kale, that's put one hand on his right shoulder. Almost instantly, he connected his arcane circuit with Antonidas' magic circuit for a short period of time, using his own magic to support the chairman. Another member of the Kirin Tor teleported to his side. It was an elf woman with long black hair. A long, pale hand rested on Antonidas' left shoulder, while the other hand, holding the staff, pointed at the fearsome invaders. Antonidas' hair and beard moved without any wind, like a hedgehog with its spikes erected. His hair and clothes were all stretched out by the surging magic in his body. Endless ice hell. It was too fast. It was so fast that it didn't seem like ice magic. It was more like some kind of flame that could arrive in an instant. In less than a tenth of a blink of an eye, the entire treasure room was frozen with Antonidas at the center. A Death Knight tried to use dark magic to block this attack, but the wave of extreme cold directly hit the Death Knight's torso and slammed him into the wall in the distance. His chest was shattered because of the impact, but in the next moment, the pieces of armor that burst out of his chest, along with his entire body, were completely frozen under a thick layer of ice. However, the smartest Death Knights, such as Tyran Gorfiend, chose to hide behind Nefarian. In just 1/100th of a second, even the famous Nefarian would be trapped in this underground treasure room that could gather the magic of more than 300 mage towers in the Dalajan. It didn't matter if it was the Black Dragon King or a dragon aspect. With this earth-shattering magic, Antonidas dared to fight it. At this moment, Nefarian's lips curled into a smile, causing the Breaking Dawn mage's heart to skip a beat. In front of Nefarian, a smooth blue magic shield suddenly appeared. The brilliance was so beautiful that it felt as if the sweeping ice elements had collided with a huge blue dragon's scale. Antonidas was so shocked that he almost bit his tongue off. For a moment he almost thought that he was attacking the king of magic, Malygos. Before he could react, his magic was reflected back at him. The power of endless ice hell was instantly compressed, turning into a large hand made of ice fog that was reflected back at twice the speed to attack its master. Antonidas suddenly felt as if he was grabbed by a pair of cold hands, and the endless cold began to squeeze his heart. He grabbed his chest tightly with both hands, trying to overcome the pain that was like angina. In the end, the Breaking Dawn mage was able to cast a spell. A purplish-red light danced around him, dispersing the cold in his body. He tried to take a deep breath, letting the cold out of his body. Fortunately, his lungs finally began to expand, his heart began to beat again, and the warm feeling returned to his body. His powerful spell saved his life, while the elf prince relied on his incomparably precious magic items to get through this difficult time. However, the female elf counselor was not so lucky. Her pale face was twisted and her whole body fell backwards. Her black hair wrapped around her like a shroud. Anyone could see that the extreme cold had taken her life. Sahira. Oh. Ignoring the old mage's scream and the elf prince's angry gaze, Nefarian threw the Dalajan eye to Tyren Gorefiend as if it was a copper coin. Let's go. Chapter 696. Antonidas looked on in despair. Was this the power of an ancient dragon that stood at the top of the world? The Breaking Dawn mage's full strength? No, even the combined attack of 2 Kirin Tor senators at the peak of the radiant moon level was not enough to defeat Nefarian. The old mage suddenly realized Kale, that's anger. The prince watched his good friend and colleague die, his handsome face twisted with anger. However, when he raised his chin, he did not have the courage to look Nefarian in the eye. Blasphemer. Leave the Dalajanite behind. The prince tried to attack Tyren directly, but a death knight who quickly moved in front of Tyren blocked his magic. As if to vent his anger at the death of his good friend, the elven prince raised and separated his hands that were filled with magic power. Almost at the same time, the death knight began to scream in pain. His limbs were torn off one by one, separated from his torso. The shocking scene made Antonidas regain his senses. The Breaking Dawn mage finally saw it. If he had not attacked Nefarian directly, the Black Dragon King would not have bothered to intervene in the battle of mortals like them. This might be an opportunity even if it was the pity of the most powerful enemy. Kill all the Death Knights. The old mage was still angry. On the other side, Nefarian opened the portal leisurely. On the other side, another Kirin Tor senator teleported over and joined the fierce battle against the Death Knights. Unfortunately, it was too late. The 3 archmages looked at the invaders with eyes full of anger. So what? As Nefarian entered the portal, the Death Knights began to blur. The Dalajan mages did not dare to follow because they could clearly feel the draconic aura of more black dragons coming from the other side of the portal. They could not be sure of the extent of the cooperation between the Black Dragon army and the Horde. If they continued to chase, it was very likely that the Black Dragons would be angered. It was very likely that they would set the entire Violet Castle on fire before the Red Dragon army arrived. A few more mages arrived, but just like their chairman, they fell into a dejected silence. Antonidas couldn't help but look at Kale, at this noble prince who was also regarded as a representative of the new generation. He suddenly understood why the Alliance's hero was Duque and not Kale, This elegant prince seemed perfect, but he lacked the most crucial courage and boldness. When Nesario was wreaking havoc on Lordaeron, only 2 mortal heroes dared to attack him head-on, Duque and Uther. Kale, who was also present at the time, was not there. However, Antonidas did not have the right to criticize Prince Kale, that's because he, too, lacked the courage to fight a godlike enemy. His heart was filled with disappointment. He and the other members of the Kirin Tor had always been the pride of the Dalajan, the protectors of the city, but tonight he had failed. He finally knew his limits. It turned out that he was just a slightly more powerful mortal. In the end, he did not have the courage to fight against a godlike existence. He stared at the starry sky and his heart was filled with regret. After all, he had watched the enemy take away the Dalajan's eye, one of the most powerful artifacts in the City of Mages. Antonidas knew very well what it meant to lose this artifact. When Duque had visited, he and Duque had discussed this issue. The Dalajan's eye represented supreme arcane power. It could provide the most powerful source of power for the Dark Portal. the Sargeras' scepter, represented supreme control. It allowed Nuzul to easily control every bit of power that was poured into the dark portal. The Book of Medivh depicted the spatial barrier structure of the entire planet Azeroth. With it, Nuzul could open the dark portal in any corner of the planet Azeroth, including the main cities of every kingdom. Fortunately, we only lost a divine artifact, Antonidas comforted himself. Soon he was slapped in the face. The sentinel sent by the Red Dragon Legion to the tomb of Sargeras in the Endless Sea sent a magical image. A terrible demon had been defeated. It was killed by a group of heroic orcs. It could be clearly seen that the orcs had taken a long stick from one of its claws. It looked like a spear with a wooden handle and a silver tail. The long stick was inlaid with a huge gem that emitted a dazzling white light. There were many sharp thorns gathered on the gem. The brilliance of the gem made the darkness in the room pale in comparison. From time to time the gem would emit sparks, but in the end, it would disappear into the darkness. Obviously that was the Sargeras' scepter, the artifact that Nuzul had dreamed of obtaining. Within a day, 2 of their most important divine items were stolen by the tribe. As a result, the news of Grom Hellscream leading a counterattack in the Silverpine Forest and the Blackhand brothers leading an army to attack the Reedridge Mountains were both shocking news. The higher-ups of the Alliance finally realized that the attacks of the entire horde in the Eastern Kingdom were actually all feints to cover up their actions of stealing the artifacts. Of course, they didn't know that the purpose of Nuzul stealing the 3 artifacts was just to escape. But in any case, the terrifying possibility of their king being directly blown up was enough to drive them crazy. Those useless Dalajan mages. They actually let the artifacts be stolen even when they knew that something might happen. But that's Nefarian, the king of the Black Dragons. Who can deal with him? If we gather all the power of the Dalajan and Kuel Salis, no matter how the higher-ups of the Alliance discussed, everyone had to look at Karazhan. Duque was the last line of defense of the entire Alliance. If even the Book of Medivh, that Duque was in charge of, was stolen, the entire Alliance would probably fall into endless panic. No one thought that the pressure on Duque was even greater. This was because Duque had to face the artifact, Gul Dan's skull. He couldn't beat him, so he had to kill the Lich King Nuzul. Standing on the scorched land in front of Karazhan, Nuzul looked at the tower in the distance that was shining with mysterious arcane light, but he wasn't nervous at all. He couldn't hear the howling of ghosts when the wind blew against the wind, because the sound of the wind couldn't compare to the whispers echoing in Nuzul's ears. He held the head in his hand and looked deep into the hollow eye sockets. Then he heard Gul Dan's voice. To Nuzul, the voice that came from the soul seemed to have a life of its own. Chapter 697. Even though Gul Dan was dead, he still hoped to do what he did when he was alive, and make his former mentor lose his mind once again. However, Nuzul would never be fooled a second time. In the past he was too gullible. He believed in Gul Dan and killed Jaden's illusion, which made him inadvertently betray his people. It was guilt that made him give up his power, and it was fear of Kill Jaden that made him give up pursuing Gul Dan. The funny thing was that Gul Dan thought that he had defeated the old shaman. My good disciple, open your eyes of the soul and see who is still alive, who still holds the power of the entire tribe, and who died and was reviled by millions and millions of orcs. He whispered to the head. As he spoke, Nuzul laughed. Nuzul had never been a weakling, whether it was the former number 1 orc shaman or a warlock who had lost his shaman powers. However, even with the skull of Gul Dan that had absorbed part of Sargeras' power, Nuzul still did not dare to attack Karazhan head-on. Relying on Gul Dan's memories, he knew very well how terrifying the magical defenses of Karazhan were. Although he did not know to what extent the weak Duke Marcus could use Karazhan's defensive system, Nuzul's cautious personality made him not dare to take risks. Fortunately, he did not need to take risks. Gul Dan had once used the dream technique to spy on Medivh. It was a tragic and failed attempt, but Gul Dan was not completely empty-handed. At least Gul Dan knew a few backdoors. Nuzul tried a few easier backdoors, but was shocked to find that the flaws in the spatial barrier had already been filled. Nuzul frowned. According to the information provided by the Black Dragon Army, Duque's Radiant Moon Archmage was about the same level as him 10 years ago. Logically speaking, Duque should not have such exquisite spatial magic attainments. Nuzul had to look for a flaw that was 1 level lower. If it was anywhere else, it would not be easy to find. Don't forget, Karazhan itself was the most active area in the entire Azeroth space. Every day there would be hundreds of large and small spatial cracks in different areas of the mage tower. Some were so small that they could not pass through at all, and some were death traps that could crush any creature. It took Nuzul a full hour to find a crack that he could safely pass through. Found it. With a gentle wave of his hand, a dazzling spatial passage appeared in front of him. He waved his hand gently, and a dazzling spatial passage appeared in front of him. That's right, when Dan established the Storm Predator clan and the Shadow Council, many of the backbones came from Nuzul's Shadow Moon clan. At that time Nuzul had lost power. Many shamans turned into warlocks and sought refuge with Dan, but there were still many warlocks who chose to support Nuzul. After Orgrim took advantage of Dan while Dan was unconscious to clear the shadow of the Shadow Moon orgs under Gul'dan. The four powerful warlocks continued to reinforce the spatial passage, while two warlocks summoned several fiend guards with the height of 2 people and blue skin to take the lead and rush over. Feeling the intense elemental fluctuations coming from the other side of the passage, Nuzul did not care. He gently blessed himself with a huge magic shield and strode in with his head held high. Evil must be destroyed. It was a deep female voice. When his vision returned to normal, the first thing Nuzul saw was a huge stone female giant. She was casting golden holy flames, and almost instantly killing the demon guards that rushed forward. His 2 high-grade warlocks could not hold on any longer. Nuzul was a little embarrassed. In his imagination, Duque was at the same level as his 2 subordinates. Who would have thought that he would be restrained by the otherworldly creature that guarded the other side? Nuzul gently raised the skull of Dan in his left hand. He used the unparalleled evil magic in the skull to cast a summon. The space in front of Nuzul twisted, and then a creature that came completely from the void appeared. He could have summoned a powerful demon, but unfortunately he did not dare to use the power of the demon too much. He was worried that his summoning of a powerful demon would attract the attention of Jaden. After all, he signed a blood contract with Jaden, and then he used the shaman's methods to deceive the deceiver. After taking benefits from Jaden, he did not obey Jaden's orders. It was a very large nightmare creature. It was much taller than a human. No, it was much taller than any orc. In front of the female giant, it was a full head taller. Its skin was covered with scales, and there were lumps that could burst at any time all over its body. It looked like the surface of its body was like a liquid. There were protruding spikes on its shoulders, forearms, chest, and other places. At the end of its long arms was a huge palm with long claws. The bottom of its face was too narrow, and the top was too wide, forming an inverted triangular head. Its slanted eyes glowed a smoky yellow, and one of its small mouths was filled with sharp fangs. Behind it, a tail was swaying from side to side. What exactly it was Nuzul did not know. As soon as it appeared, it wanted to devour Nuzul, but the power of the skull of Dan easily suppressed its will. The huge monster suddenly jumped on the female giant, who was wrapped in holy light, and wrestled with the female giant. The female giant's holy light burned its body, causing it to scream. However, after the lumps on its body burst, the acid that flowed out also hurt the female giant. In the next moment, a powerful arcane puppet wrapped in lightning blocked in front of him. Nuzul gave a contemptuous smile, and another powerful summoned creature came out, suppressing this huge guard. The 2 huge existences fought on the huge balcony. Nuzul frowned. The defense of Karazhan was higher than he thought. However, he only had 2 slots for ordinary top-level summons. Gritting his teeth, Nuzul had no choice but to use Dan's soul to summon a huge hellfire that was wrapped in flames. This kind of war machine, which was made of huge green stones that kept burning, did not have much self-awareness. As long as the soul imprint on it was erased after use, it should not be discovered by Jaden. Just like that, surrounded by several orc warlocks, Nuzul went into Karazhan with the hellfire, opening the way. When that hellfire kicked open the wooden door in front, Nuzul and a red-haired female elf, who was scooping meatballs from a steaming hot pot, looked at each other in a daze. Chapter 698. Did Duque not do anything when the sun and the moon were fighting so fiercely outside? Impossible. Duque, who had always planned before taking action, thought about Nuzul for a long time. He gave up the idea of gathering all 3 artifacts. After all, he couldn't get Sargeras's scepter. What if he courted death by trying? Perhaps a few tenths of Sargeras's remaining divine will could kill him with that tiny body of his. He couldn't get the Dalajan's eye either. That thing was the national treasure of the Dalajan. Even if he notified it, he would have done his best. The only thing he had a chance to save was the Mediva's book. Duque didn't want to go to Draenor to play. He wasn't afraid that he would go to Draenor after beating up Kil'jaeden's adjutant and his army commander. After all, Kil'jaeden should have been delayed by something in the original history. Duque was afraid of the earth-shattering explosion that blew Draenor apart. In the original timeline, Turalyon and Aurelia were killed, and Khadgar was blown to wander in the void for who knows how many years before he survived. Big brother, don't play. Withstanding a nuclear explosion with the body of a mortal, how could it be possible for a human to do that? Even without the explosion, Duque wasn't optimistic about the expedition to the Outland. The alliance was full of internal conflicts, and it would be difficult to defeat a fleeing Nizul with just a few 100,000 expeditionary troops. To conquer Draenor, which was not much smaller than planet Azeroth. Did they want to kill the Beastmen with just these few people? How was that possible? After going around in a big circle in his mind, the simplest way was to protect the Mediva's book, block the watchtower, and then slowly fortify the entire blasted land. As long as they could do it, after a few decades, the tribe would be finished in Draenor. Since he had made up his mind, it was easy. The biggest difference from the original history was that something as important as the Book of Mediv wasn't placed in Stormwind City's library to be managed. Doing that would be stupid. What was the difference between that and an unprotected child taking a huge sum of money and running around a bandit's den? The Book of Mediv was in Karazhan, and Duque carried it with him. That was not enough. Therefore Duque invited a great god. Here came the problem. What kind of price did one have to pay to seduce a god who could punch the Demon King and kick the Black Dragon army? In the past, Duque had been very vexed. However, ever since a certain dragon queen awakened a certain gluttonous talent because of the ice cream, things became much simpler. This was the scene that Nizul was presented with. What the hell? Queen Alexstrasza didn't care about the soup splashing on her impressive breasts. She breathed out hot air as she sent one meatball after another into her mouth. Her beautiful face looked ridiculous because of the number of meatballs under her cheeks. However, the dragon's might that she unintentionally exuded naturally frightened Nizul. Almost subconsciously, it made the Hellfire that did not have much wisdom stop moving. It looked like she was the one who scared Hellfire so much that it didn't dare to move. Guru, demons? The queen reluctantly put down her spoon and stood up a little awkwardly. Aluogurula. You asked for it. On the other side, Duque, who was walking over with a plate of delicious food, was speechless. He held his forehead and said, "Please? Can't you eat it before you talk? The giant dragon army has lost all face because of you." The queen seemed to realize that she had lost her composure. She took a deep breath, and then with a gulp, she swallowed the more than 10 meatballs in her mouth in one gulp. Duke's face fell as he watched the egg-sized meatballs protruding out of the queen's thin neck and into her bottomless stomach before disappearing without a trace. No, it should have collapsed a long time ago. In order to tempt this glutton, after receiving the news that Nizul might attack, he and the Windrunner sisters had been busy for a few hours as a chef and a waitress. They had made a few meals, but it was not enough for the queen. A dragon that weighed dozens of tons turned into the size of a human, and even its weight dropped to 100 pounds. This was not scientific. It was wishful thinking to use a human's appetite to satisfy a dragon's appetite. Well, there was no point in thinking about this. But I have carefully prepared these soup meatballs. Whoa. Ugh. The queen burped and then accidentally spat out a small amount of flames. She then gave Duque a thumbs up. Actually, meatballs are very delicious. I can even taste them in my stomach. Damn, do dragons even have taste buds in their stomachs? Turning her head, the queen was a little angry when she saw Nizul's green skin. Seeing the orcs reminded her of those humiliating years. Then she looked at Hellfire, which had been included in the category of demons. As smart as the queen was, how could she not know what Duque was planning? Although I knew that you must be up to no good by suddenly inviting me to dinner, for the sake of the delicious food, I will help you kill every demon and black dragon that appears in front of me. The queen struck a domineering pose, looking majestic. Well, if she could wipe the soup off the corner of her mouth, that would be right. Unfortunately, she was just a clown now. Even so, the queen's words still made Duque happy. Damn. This was a golden medal of immunity. Wait. Not including the orcs? Duque lost his voice. The queen was dispirited. Not including the orcs. Duque was a little disappointed. He did not ask any more. The dragon slumber temple was so conflicted. The laws of their guardian dragons were not something that outsiders could understand. It did not matter. This was already very good. Duque put the cutlery in his hand on the coffee table that was specially prepared for uninvited guests. He took off his apron and handed it to Sasha, who had already taken out her bow and arrows. He loosened his muscles and strode towards the chief orc warlock. Nazul, right? Very well, let's fight one-on-one. Along with Duque's domineering words, an illusory dragon claw suddenly appeared in the air. With just a squeeze, the hellfire, which was enough to make half of the human army fall into chaos and despair, turned into powder and dissipated in the wind. Nazul was horrified and almost subconsciously took half a step back. Aurelia smiled bitterly and rested her chin on her hand. Duque, you little b*****starred. You make it sound so dignified. Sasha continued, but I like that he's a little bad, but he can stand up at the critical moment and have a heroic spirit. While the Windrunner sisters were teasing, Nazul was cursing in his heart. He finally understood. The so-called duel was under the premise that he could not summon any demons and fight with Duque. Damn it. Could a warlock who could not summon demons still be called a warlock? Chapter 699. Well, a duel between two people. One-on-one. It sounded fair, didn't it? In fact, it was bullsh***t. Although warlocks had the talents of demon, destruction, and pain, not allowing a warlock to have a demon pet was like letting a karate player cut off a pair of palms to play senpai. Nazul's strength was at least halved. Since ancient times, warlocks had relied on hellhounds to disgust the mage to death. Hellhounds could not only provide warlocks with magic resistance, but they could also interrupt the mage's casting from time to time. Well, the hellhound that was just summoned was directly wiped out by Alexstrasza. Then she found a void demon and tried to make the void demon give herself a magic shield. The moment the demon came out, it was also wiped out by the queen. Nazul cried when he pulled the fight to such an extent. Damn, this was a fair duel? This was the so-called one-on-one? Nazul was so angry that his nose was crooked. Nazul also saw Duque's viciousness. What made him even more bitter was that his plan to crush Karazhan had gone down the drain. After seeing Nefarian, how could he not know that this skinny elf woman in front of him was most likely the dragon aspect Alexstrasza? Even if she did not attack him, he would not be able to please himself. This Lich King had never been a courageous person. Grom Hellhound's roar was, "Don't be a coward, just do it." Well, Nazul, more than cowardly? More than cowardly? Even the sun shrunk for you to see. Other villains would at least say some harsh words and then make a magnificent, strategic retreat. Well, Nazul actually did not say a word. He raised his chin, and a few of his bitter warlock brothers immediately rushed forward, swearing to die. He turned around and left without looking back, as if he had torn down your door and left without saying a word of apology. Hey. You come as you please, you leave as you please. If you rob the bride and tear down the door, at least leave a red packet. If you don't leave your life and artifact behind, don't you feel embarrassed? Duque sneered and used a large ice shield to withstand the warlock's annihilation spells, then raised his hands and made a closing gesture. It was as if a pair of invisible giant palms had appeared in the void and forcibly closed the portal that Nazul had created. Creak! A teeth-aching sound stimulated everyone's eardrums. Nazul's beard curled up in anger. He turned around abruptly, and the white skull paint on his face began to fall as his facial muscles trembled in anger. Duke Marcus, he yelled in the common tongue, Duke Marcus. It's true that the dragon is a powerhouse, but she's not a qualified bodyguard. Don't think that I can't kill you under her protection. Duque crooked his finger and smirked. Come. I'm not afraid of you. His hand gesture was also a signal. Almost as soon as he moved his finger, the Windrunner sisters behind him made their move. Since Nazul did not care about the rules of the pugilistic world of one-on-one fights, then in a group fight, who knew who would be afraid of who? Aurelia's violent wind and thunder arrow easily hit a high-grade warlock who had lost his shield. Without the shield that the void demon had exchanged for the sacrifice, the only thing that could resist the attack was their own equipment and mortal body. They were not like Nazul, who had seemingly strange but incomparably luxurious epic equipment. Warlocks who relied too much on their shields were no different from lambs waiting to be slaughtered after losing their shields that could protect them from physical attacks. The wind and thunder arrow directly exploded the head of a warlock, and even the broken part of the cervical vertebra was charred black. On the other side, Sasha's wind arrow was not as domineering as her sister's wind and thunder arrow, but when it came to killing people, its efficiency was not bad. Next to her, the heroic spirit sorcerer Khadgar had just rushed out and stabbed a warlock in the back like a thief. He suddenly found that the rest of Nazul's subordinates had been killed by the Windrunner sisters. As a result, the heroic spirit warriors that rushed out from behind either ran to help the Saintess of Chastity and the Curator, or simply became spectators and retreated to a distance to cheer. If Nazul's face was not covered with a thick layer of white powder, his face would have been very black. Nazul was very afraid of death, but he found that when he had nowhere to retreat, he was the kind of person who would burst out with unlimited potential. Perhaps this was the human desire to live. Above his head, a huge fire cloud the size of a small villa was rolling, as if it was gathering a storm. However, this firestorm did not look like a simple gathering of elements, nor did it look like a dead object. The destructive fire elements circled around it rhythmically, like a strong beating heart in a human chest. The fire cloud absorbed the energy from the void elemental realm, and every beat was like the deep breath of a giant dragon, mixed with wind, thunder, and fire. Nazul's magic staff in his right hand guided the fire cloud, and the skull of Ghoul, Dan, in his left hand continued to pour even more mana into the fire cloud. Even if this fire cloud was not a dragon breath, it was still similar to the dragon breath of a dragon aspect. Oh. Seemingly aware of her rudeness, Alexstrasza finally used a handkerchief to wipe the soup off her mouth, and immediately set her eyes on Nazul. A Breaking Dawn mystic already had the ability to hurt a dragon aspect, and with the help of a divine artifact, this was enough to pose a threat to a dragon aspect. The queen could not help but narrow her eyes. Duque, it's fine if you want to act cool, but don't go overboard. Because the entrance to Karazhan had been changed, the battlefield was now on the huge balcony where the knight's nightmare had been near the broken staircase. At this moment, the sky above the balcony seemed to be divided into two distinct sides. On one side, there was a red curtain of destructive flames that lit up the atmosphere. When the fire cloud rolled and rolled, the high-temperature flames seemed to be able to burn through the sky of Karazhan, and even the illusory space behind them had to be ignited. The other side was illusory and blurred. Half the sky was flashing with purplish-blue arcane light, and delicate mage hands were turning from illusory to real. This process was neither fast nor slow, and people could easily see that these hands were not only holding magic staffs that everyone had seen before, but also some that they had not seen before. Does Duque have so many magic staffs? Sasha was a little confused. I don't know. I only recognized the Grand Marshal's battle staff, and the Jordan's staff. Aurelia was also confused. Today, Duque was holding the Tidahak Step of Time, with 4 sharp horns. It was completely black, and the body of the staff emitted a blue and white light. And floating around him were all the magic staffs that he had sealed in the corner of his memory. Nazul, Duque said softly and then said, this move is a special gift for you. The name of the move is very suitable for you, and that is, Unlimited Staff. Chapter 700. What was a retard? Nazul was a classic example of a retard. Kill, Jaden threw out a blood contract, and he foolishly went to sign it. If he was cheated by a swindler, it could be said that he was momentarily blinded by greed. Perhaps he could win a few tears as a victim, but what about after he gained power? He actually did not want it and hid. He did not go to clean himself up and become a tribal hero like Grom, nor did he have enough ambition like Ghoul, Dan to go all the way to the end. Ghoul, Dan knelt down and came out of the mountains out of fear of death. For a guy with such a weak will, it was no wonder that he lost to Arthas in the original history. Even with the fusion of the will, it was still the idiot's will that dominated. Calling Nazul a retard was letting him off easy. So to a certain extent, the unlimited staff represented Duque's disdain for him. On the other hand, it implied the importance Duque attached to Nazul. Don't look at how Duque set up the Dragon's Gate and used the Foodie Queen to make Nazul bleed. Unfortunately, the Queen could only help to this extent. The strength of a dragon aspect was inseparable from the iron law that it had to abide by. This was also the instinct that the Titans of creation had imprinted in the deepest part of their souls when they created them. In the end, Duque still had to rely on his own radiant moon strength to fight against the Breaking Dawn warlock Nazul who had a divine weapon. Wasn't it very difficult? If it was anywhere else outside of Karazhan, even if Duque could resurrect and run back to his corpse, he would not be able to defeat Nazul even if he died 10,000 times. Nazul, who held the skull of Ghoul, Dan, was like a nuclear power plant with sufficient fuel that could generate almost unlimited power. How could Duque, a radiant moon wizard who used a boiler to generate power, fight against Nazul? Fortunately, This was Karazhan. Duque, who had successfully controlled Karazhan, was fighting against Nazul with the power of the entire wizard tower. In this case there was a new possibility. That was to forcibly exchange an exaggerated amount of quality for an opponent's. Before that there was a prerequisite, and that was to not let Nazul's pain magic extinguish first. Although curses dealt continuous damage for someone as small as Duque, a single hit was equivalent to an instant kill. As expected, Nazul was not a good person. The moment before the fire cloud was launched, Nazul's left index finger flicked stealthily. Without a sound, without a trace, a pile of curses quietly flew towards Duque. If not for the system notification, Duque might really have fallen for it. The next moment, the Windrunner sisters had already retreated 100 meters away and were hiding by the door. After Duque's transformation, Karazhan was like a world for every district. Other than the simple visual and weather that were common, each district was actually in a different space. As for Duque, he had already created more than 100 copies of Duque. True mirror image, infinitely small version. The Duke, standing on the spot, looked like he was suffering from dozens of incurable diseases. After letting out a blood-curdling scream, he clutched his chest and fell to the ground in pain. He twitched a few times and died. If there were not more than 100 Duque watching, the Windrunner sisters hiding by the door would have been scared half to death. F***CK. He's dead? Was it poison? Was it poison in sh**T? No matter how stupid Duque number 233 is, he wouldn't eat sh**T, right? No need to ask, it must be Nazul. Yes. Despicable and shameless. Nazul was stunned. He almost thought that he had fallen for an illusion. He was not a country bumpkin who had never seen illusion spells, nor had he never seen the Sword Saint's mirror image spell. However, to his knowledge, even though the mirror image spell was extremely lifelike, it was still a few images that were exactly the same as the real person. They had no physical body and would not leave footprints on the ground. They could only deceive enemies who were slow and had poor dynamic vision. When had he ever seen such a lifelike mirror image that looked exactly like a real person? No, this was no longer a mirror image. This was simply a clone. It was like a clone with an independent personality. Not to mention Nazul, even Khadgar, who had lived for more than 10 years, Windsor, who had lived for more than 1,000 years, Aurelia, who had lived for more than 3,000 years, and Alexstrasza, who had lived for more than 20,000 years, were stunned when they saw this scene. That's right. These were not simple clones. These were the scolding clones that Duque had recorded a lot of dialogue and actions in the system. Duke's doppelgangers scattered in all directions. They even flew into the sky and pointed at Nazul as if they were poking him in the face and spitting at him. I hate shameless and cowardly people like you the most. It's really bad luck for the tribe to let you be the great chief. Do you really think you can escape with the Book of Mediv? Idiot, have you forgotten the blood contract you signed with Kill Jaden? Retard. Even if you run to the ends of the universe, Kill Jaden will still find you. Nazul's body trembled like a sieve. He never thought that these top-secret things would be known by Duque. These words that struck his heart were like a nightmare to him, who was already mentally fragile. Not to mention that there were more than 100 Duques scolding him at the same time, creating a shocking atmosphere of being condemned by thousands of people. Duque, who had used the invisibility spell to hide behind Alexstrasza, sneered. Bumpkin Nazul. Have you never seen how the celestial scolding clones destroy a good young man? Then you should see it for yourself. The foodie queen tilted her head and looked at the invisible Duque with a surprised expression. Duque blinked. Of course, he did not expect to hide from the Red Dragon Queen, whose senses were so sensitive that they exploded. The queen said, I suddenly realized that you can actually be quite mean sometimes. Duque used the moral integrity that Archbishop Fao had passed on to him and replied in a holy manner, is that so? I only use bastard tactics on bastards. Aurelia said, Sister, should we consider changing men? Sasha said, let's observe for a while. On the other side, seeing that the scolding was almost over, the Duque suddenly made a move. Together with the staff of the magician's hand in the sky, countless different kinds of magic blasted out. Scorch, Shockwave, Flame Blast, Frost Arrow, Arcane Impact, Arcane Missile. In addition to these, there were also elemental attacks similar to the shaman's power of wind and thunder. Nazul was completely stunned. If it was a single element, he could still use the corresponding element and use his higher and more concentrated magic to bully Duque. High-level mystery could easily defeat low-level mystery. But these magic attacks seemed to be irregular, but they could very well tear and destroy the elements he had gathered. Nazul had to wrap his body in fire clouds as a certain degree of protection. Chapter 701. With the addition of the skull of Ghoul, Dan, Nazul's amazing magic power was being forcefully worn down by these different elemental powers. There was no blood and flesh splattering. There was no soul dispersing. This method of using pure skill and extraordinary control to make up for the lack of magic power level was different even in the eyes of a super being like Alexstrasza who had lived for more than 20,000 years. The higher the level of power, the easier it was to defeat everything. This method of fighting the strong with the weak and striving for victory was more thrilling than any battle of the same level. Nazul had the quality, and Duque had the quantity with the support of the wizard tower. They were like millstones that consumed each other. Especially when the breaking dawn dark power on the surface of Nazul's fire cloud was worn down, revealing the purer and darker divine power of the skull of Ghoul, Dan, Duque's magic power consumption immediately skyrocketed. Only Duque could think of and dare to do a radiant moon against a divine. Even Alexstrasza was tongue-tied. In order not to expose the invisible Duque behind her, she could only sigh. "Duque, how dare you?" Duque flattered the dragon. "Don't I still have you? I won't do anything. What if this beastman scum attacks you first?" At this point, if the Red Dragon Queen still did not know what Duque was up to, then she was a queen for nothing. Alright, if she was in the middle of a fierce battle and met a troublesome teammate who lured the monster over, then this was a grudge. If he asked before drawing the monster, then that was respect. Yes, the Red Dragon army, who abided by the Iron Law, was strictly forbidden from attacking ordinary intelligent beings, but the Iron Law did not say that one could not fight back when attacked by ordinary intelligent beings. The queen was still thinking about why Duque had been so humble and eager to learn, asking her for the laws of the Dragon Slumber Temple. Of course the queen did not mind. It was something that had been publicized in the Dragon Slumber Temple for a long time anyway. Now that she thought about it, it seemed that Duque had been studying the loopholes in the law. Alexstrasza was also speechless. Hey, are you trying to take advantage of me? This meal of yours is really expensive. No. You don't have the heart to let me, a top chef who's so kind, so righteous and so passionate about the world of Azeroth, perish just like that, right? Duque acted shamelessly. It was obvious that she was threatening him with a long-term meal ticket. Oh no, it was seduction. The Windrunner sisters were also snickering. This was the different way of doing things brought about by different perspectives. The dragon race abided by the rules. They looked at the iron rules all day and thought about what they could not do. Duke, a modern man, was like a cunning lawyer in the modern world. His way of thinking was that as long as it was not forbidden, he would do it. Moreover, the punishment was not severe. As long as there was enough profit, he would do it. That's right. Duque was instigating and leading Alexstrasza astray. Of course, she knew that the orc warlock in front of her, who was filled with evil energy, was not a good person. However, adding a new race as an enemy required the unanimous approval of the Dragon King's Council. However, Duque had opened a new window for her. She was also hesitant. She did not know if this was the beginning of some kind of depravity. After all, many times the devil tempted people to commit crimes. It was also a small mistake, starting from small principles and then slowly sinking. Duque saw her hesitation. This is just an insurance. I never thought of forcing you to violate the principles of the Dragon Slumber Temple. Even if you don't do anything, I still have a 60% chance of taking care of Nazul. Duque did not force the queen to make a choice immediately because Duque also realized that it was likely to involve the high issue of conscience. The people in the Azeroth Justice Camp were still very mindful of their conscience. It was true that Duque wanted to borrow the queen's power, but if he did not do it well and the Red Dragon Queen violated the original history and really fell, it would not be fun. Did they not see how fierce Arthas, who was originally a paladin, once fell into the Death Knight? On the other side, the fierce battle had also entered a white-hot stage. The air of the platform was filled with a nauseating pungent smell. The smell was more destructive than the dragon's breath, stimulating the sense of smell and taste of every creature present. On one side there were hell-like flames and on the other side, there was a gorgeous magic attack like a grand fireworks show. When the two different scenes intersected in mid-air, there was a huge dividing line in the center like a crack in space. This was not a simple optical illusion. This bright belt of light was slowly pressing towards Nazul, and at the same time, constantly devouring Nazul's scattered magic power, gradually cutting off the connection between Nazul and the fire elemental realm. This is impossible? Nazul was so shocked that the muscles on his face trembled violently, causing the white powder on his face to fall in large chunks, revealing half of his face that was more horrible than an old witch's makeup. This could not go on. Nazul's timid nature had determined that he was never a person who would fight fiercely. He was more willing to see the enemy play their cards and then kill them in one fell swoop. Unfortunately now, he had observed for a long time and did not find any flaws in Duque. Every Duque seemed to be real. They drew magic power from different places and then transformed it into magic attacks. Compared to an illusion, Nazul was more willing to believe that these were true avatars of Duque's soul that had been cut into countless pieces, and at the same time held a part of Duque's power and soul. Come, judgment of destruction. Suddenly, more than 90% of the volume of the fire cloud wrapped around Nazul, and the next moment the cloud of fire exploded. It was as if someone had thrown 1,000,000 grenades into the air and exploded them. The eyes were full of splashing flames, and these rockets filled every corner of the air. Within a radius of 100 meters, there was no room for anyone to dodge. Countless Duque's ice shields were broken. Except for those Duque who had time to open the ice barrier, most of the Duque screamed and fell, and then turned into illusory magic dust. Aurelia, who was hiding behind the door with only half of her head poking out, was stunned. If the real Duque was not secretly hugging her third sister's waist and winking at her from the other side of the door, she might really have been scared out of her wits. Suddenly she felt that the mage had ice block, the thief had cloak, and the knight had invincibility. These three professions were all F***king gangsters. At this time, a Duque appeared triumphantly, and then the moment he appeared, he was hit by 20 curses and died in a second. Duque bared his teeth. Fortunately, he did not go out to show off or else he would not know which curse he died from. Damn, according to Luo's words, this was a big move, right? After a big move there was still such combat power? He really deserved to be called the first Lich King. Chapter 702. In the past, when he played games, Duque never understood why bosses often had several stages. Now that he thought about it, it should be because every strong boss had their own trump card that could turn the tables. There was no such thing as defeating the world with one move. He used Alexstrasza to destroy Nazul's demonic sea and used the system elf to control the doppelgangers to continuously deplete Nazul's mana. That was not enough. Nazul must have another trump card. Duque did not want to let Nazul go, so he could only play the game by himself. If he was alone, of course he could play infinite corpse dragging. Unfortunately, such a big thing could not be hidden from the people around him. He could use safety as a reason to send Jaina and Ronan to Stormwind City. After giving Wuxia a slot for eternal life, he temporarily sent her away, but he could not send the Windrunner sisters away. To be able to fight side by side with him was the advantage of having a female hero as a partner. On the other hand, this was also a restraint. Because last time, when Aurelia was not there, Duque had to drag his dying body to save the Red Dragon Queen. This had already made Aurelia regret for a long time, and this time she was not willing to let Duque face Nazul alone. Since Nazul dared to step on the scene without bringing a few powerful chieftains, and he even acted like a boss with his nose in the air, Duque naturally wouldn't be polite to him. It's time. Let's go. Duque sent a magic message, and on the other side of the huge platform, another door was suddenly kicked open. Two golden figures dashed out. They were two paladins riding spirit warhorses, Tyrion Fordring and Gavin Rad-Doom. According to the original plan, Duque wanted to capture all the Silver Four sages except Turalyon to work for him. However, his relationship with Tyreenas was no longer the same as before. He had extorted 10 million gold coins from Tyreenas, and now Tyreenas was asking for Theon. Even though Duque was dealing with the great chief of the Horde, Tyreenas still hesitated for a long time before letting Theon go. The Lordaeron king's excuse was also very dignified. The tribe's #1 warrior, Hellscream, was here, and only Migraine could not hold him off. Hence he had to leave Uther and Sidon behind. The Dalajan had just lost another Kirin Tor counselor, and now they were unwilling to send anyone out. That was the only way. That was why Duque's side could only arrange a deformed party of 5, 2 paladins, 2 rangers and a mage. If this was in the game, it would be a terrible configuration. However, the 5 people who stepped into the hero domain were all powerful people who were proficient in 3 types of talents. Don't look at how the 2 paladins swung their hammers and attacked. In reality, they were monsters who could fight, tank and heal. This time, the white foundation on Nazul's ugly face finally changed. Araduda. There was a vague incantation from his mouth, and then a curse that was completely invisible to others flew out. It looked like it would hit Tyrion in less than half a second. In that split second, a duke magically appeared in front of Theon and took the curse. Then, with a stretch of his legs, he fell to the ground and died. Tyrion was not blind. Of course, he knew that Duque's clone had saved his life. However, as a paladin second only to Uther, Tyrion's psychological quality was also superb. There was no change in his resolute face. He waved the huge shining golden warhammer, ignoring the fire snakes around Nizul, activated his invincibility, and hit Nizul head-on. Over 10,000 degrees Celsius of flames washed over the golden barrier of light that Theon had condensed with holy light, emitting a piercing crackling sound unique to the raging flames. This was a duel between magic and holy light. It was also the ultimate duel between destruction and protection. For a moment, Theon thought he couldn't hold on any longer. However, the golden light on his equipment supported him. It was the paladin equipment he had obtained from Karazhan. It was equipment that even his good friends Sidon and Turalyon had been envious of for a long time. As one of the 5 silver saints, the belief in the holy light was an important factor, but equipment was also a part of strength. A large cluster of frost arrows shot out just in time, temporarily suppressing Nizul's raging flames. In the name of the holy light, I will punish you. A golden hammer descended from the sky, approaching Nizul's head at high speed. Nizul did not know about the paladin's skills, but in his heart, he predicted the arrival of the final judgment. Unable to hold back anymore, Nizul hardened his heart and activated the ivory eagle necklace around his neck. The giant beast's teeth, which had been refined with the power of shamans and then reinfused with the power of evil demons, had unimaginable defensive abilities. In a single breath, a total of 7 mysterious barriers appeared. At this moment, the storm of arrows from the Windrunner sisters arrived. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. 3 sets of 21 arrows in a row, forcing Nizul to quickly adjust the structure of the shield. From protection against blunt weapons to arrow protection and elemental protection. Gavin Rad's heavy hammer also arrived. Damn it. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. It was unreasonable to have more people fighting against fewer people. If any one of them came alone, Nizul, who was once a shaman and was proficient in all types of magic and close combat, had 100 ways to kill any one of them. But with several different types of strong enemies attacking together, Nizul was a bit distracted. Poof. It was like a bubble popping, and then at least 5 layers of Nizul's shields were broken. This was not the end. A Duque appeared behind Nizul. This avatar, which had condensed a lot of Duque's magic, made a set of attacks that Nizul did not expect. Strictly speaking, it was not even known if this was magic. It was a palm that was very similar to a horse stance punch. The palm pushed out horizontally, and even Theon, who was separated by Nizul, felt the fierce wind. Bigby's impact palm. This strange move, which was completely different from the existing Azeroth spell system, made Nizul very uncomfortable. When he was defending, he made a half-second mistake. In the state of the opponent's group attack, this was undoubtedly quite fatal. Nizul, who had been standing motionless like a towering mountain, staggered forward after being hit. Gavin Rad launched a sneaky attack from the bottom up. Although it still could not break all of Nizul's shields, it made Nizul temporarily lose the ability to cast spells. Not good. Nizul's heart skipped a beat. Chapter 703. It was as if they had practiced it countless times. After the clone was killed by Nizul's curse, the 3 new dukes used Bigby's grappling palm, Bigby's diamond fist, and Bigby's crushing palm on Nizul. In the eyes of the onlookers, Nizul was beaten up by a monk, a new profession that had yet to appear in the Eastern Kingdom. A palm strike caused Nizul to lose his center of gravity, and Gavin Rad sent him flying with a hammer. Then Duke number 2 followed up with a grappling hold and grabbed him again. Then he used his fist, which was as big as a water tank and had a high concentration of magic power, to add a heavy blow at close range. Finally, he used the stance of the rising dragon fist to hit Nizul's chin. A series of actions were completed in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. When Nizul was sent flying, everyone was shocked to discover that Duke's doppelganger's rising dragon palm had sent Nizul right towards the giant hammer that was descending from the sky. Ultimate holy verdict. Bang! It was an earth-shattering sound. Even through clothes, skin, and muscles, everyone could clearly see that Theon's holy light had completely penetrated Nizul's body, from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. Whoa! Nuzul did not even scream. He opened his hideous mouth full of fangs, but not a single word came out. Was done. Everyone knew the importance of magic circuits to a spell-type professional. After encountering the Orc Warlock for the first time in the first year of the Dark Portal, the Dalajan mages waited impatiently for a long time before they successfully obtained an Orc Warlock's corpse. After dissecting it, they concluded that Orc Warlocks, like humans and elves, all had magic circuits. Since the structure was the same, then Theon's holy light penetrated Nuzul's body and killed his chance of survival. What would happen to a mage's magic circuit when holy light, which did not belong to the natural elemental domain, wantonly rushed into it? The consequence was a state of being unable to cast spells, even more serious than silence. No one knew how many magic circuits Nuzul had, but it was obvious that the circuits with the spine as the central axis had all collapsed under the impact of the ultra-high purity of the holy light. Perhaps there would be other smaller magic circuits. The main circuit had definitely collapsed. Gavin Rad swung his hammer again. This was not an ordinary holy light attack, but a fatal strike with the power of lightning. Yes, strike while he's down. After hanging out with Duque for so long, Gavin Rad had become a little corrupted. At this moment, the tusk ornaments on Nuzul's waist suddenly shattered. A few black shadows suddenly jumped out and shot towards the two paladins and the two rangers. Group Death Coil. Death Coil could be said to be a warlock's life-saving move. As long as one was hit, not only would they lose control of their body due to fear and fall into a state of paralysis, the powerful dark energy could also forcibly convert 20% of the damage into the warlock's vitality. This was not just one shot, but 4 shots of Death Coil. Most importantly, an inanimate object would not be able to trigger Death Coil. It was conceivable that if the vitality of all 4 heroes was absorbed at the same time, Nuzul would definitely recover in an instant. At this critical moment, the movements of the 4 guys were surprisingly consistent. Their empty left hands directly fled to their waist pouches and threw a white fluffy thing towards the Death Coil that looked like a black skull. Squeak! The small animals screamed at the same time, causing Nuzul's face to turn pale. All that was left was despair. Death Coil had indeed hit, but unfortunately, it had hit the little white mouse that had been prepared in advance. The pitiful scapegoat turned into a dried rat as soon as his legs touched the ground, and he fell from the sky. Nuzul's heart was the same as these little guys, falling from mid-air into the abyss of despair. Even this was predicted? Unwilling. Nuzul had never thought that a good time to trample on the field would turn into him stepping into his grave like an idiot. What's going on? Did Nefarian not have good intentions from the start to send me to my death? How did he know that I would definitely not be able to defeat the people of Karazhan? Or did he predict the existence of the Red Dragon Queen? I don't understand. So what if I don't understand? Too late. I won't give him a chance to turn the tables. The incomparably powerful wild arrow had arrived. They perfectly bypassed the 2 paladins beside Nuzul and hit where they wanted to hit. Like a target that had been nailed to a target, Nuzul was hit by more than 30 arrows in the blink of an eye. His whole body was nailed to the solid granite ground by a steel arrow that was more than half a meter long. This was not the end. The 2 paladins directly hammered down. Bang! 2 dull hammered down at the same time, making a sound as if it had been a single hit. After a short period of paralysis, Nuzul clearly felt that his right shoulder and right lung had completely collapsed. As for the abdomen that was hit by the heavy hammer, there was a hole on the left side of his waist. His intestines were squeezed out of the wound as if they were escaping. No, the blood and lung debris that came out of his lungs quickly filled Nuzul's throat. He could not even say half a word. However, a mystic did not necessarily need words to activate magic. In his mind that had not completely collapsed, Nuzul said a few words. The Dark Portal? Save me. An accident that Duque absolutely did not want to see happened. The last sound that came out of Nuzul's heart turned into a distant cry. It was not a cry of a human, a cry that was not a living thing. It was a cry at the level of the soul. However, it caused a reaction from the Dark Portal in the faraway Cursed Land. Rustle. In the Cursed Land, every orc that was camped along the south side of the Dark Portal ran out of their tents in horror because they felt the vibration from the Dark Portal. The chiefs looked at the pillars on both sides of the Dark Portal in astonishment. The huge statue of the mage holding the sword was actually trembling slightly. On the ground, the red gravel rose and fell like waves. Everything seemed to be foreboding something. All of a sudden, the door of darkness in the cursed land closed, and the tribe that was trapped there lost all the support from Draenor in an instant. The orcs cried out in shock. The one who could not accept this fact was Duque. He opened his red eyes wide and watched as a huge all-like unknown object pierced the sky above the platform. A deep spatial passage that looked like a black hole opened in an instant. The dark portal responded to Nuzul's call and was using its incomparably brutal power to try to pull Nuzul back from the space of Karazhan. Chapter 704. It was never easy to open a stable portal in a complicated place filled with all kinds of spatial rifts. The door of darkness had done it with its boundless and unparalleled might. Amidst the strange sound of glass breaking, the scene of the void was divided into countless pieces, constantly tumbling. Mortals who could not see the mystery of space were completely confused at this moment. For example, Gavin Rad saw that one of his hands was growing on his thigh. Everyone was shocked except Duque. "Stand down." Duque's shout made everyone find their backbone again. The invincible effect caused by the holy light could resist the turbulence of space? Stop kidding. Holy Shield could block the damage of the space fragments, so it would not be called Holy Shield, but Cosmic Invincibility. A pair of mages' hands pulled the shoulder armor of the two paladins back. Immediately, the two paladins took advantage of the force, kicked their legs at the same time, and directly dodged the space fragments that were just a few centimeters away. Ha ha ha. Nuzul coughed up blood while laughing wildly. He was afraid of death, so how could he not have a backup plan? The dark portal was his backup plan. That's right, the dark portal itself was a dead thing, and it did not have its own will. However, when Nuzul attached the soul fragments he collected when killing his enemies to the dark portal, even if they were thousands of miles away, he could still control the dark portal to perform the same action as the warlock's summoning ritual. The only thing that Nuzul miscalculated was the attack power of Duque and the fact that he could not summon demons. Nuzul laughed wildly, but his heart was cold after surviving a disaster. The strong of the alliance was really not something that the tribe could deal with. At this moment, Nuzul's body had begun to become illusory. It seemed that in 3 seconds he would be able to complete the teleportation. At this time the light of Flash suddenly lit up in front of Nuzul. Replacing the two paladins who flew back was Duque's figure in a blue and white mage's robe. If Duque looked like a mage now, then Duque was definitely a melee mage. Under the scanning of the system elf, he saw every piece of space fragment that was spinning in the void. Then, like a spear, he suddenly lunged forward in a horse stance, thrusting out the Tidahark step of time in his hand. The trident-shaped black spearhead pierced into Nuzul's illusory abdomen without any hindrance. Then it opened fire. Originally, the hundreds of arcane missiles that poured out from Duque's magic staff could not hit Nuzul. Strictly speaking, Nuzul's body had begun to disappear from this dimension. If it were any other mage, they would not be able to do anything about it. Not Antonidas. Not an Astrian. Perhaps the Mediv of the past could do it, but unfortunately, the Mediv had already become the dust of history, at least for the time being. Nuzul was unlucky. He had encountered the even more bizarre Duque. Duque did not have the destructive power to destroy the world, nor did he have the supreme magic power of ultra-high purity. But in terms of control and precision, Duque was definitely the best in the world. The dark portal was just a dead object. It would only instinctively follow the instructions of the soul fragment and teleport creatures in the specified space dimension. The basis of teleportation was to set the coordinates of the starting point and destination. If either one was messed up, then it was likely to be teleported to the void or a spatial crack. Duque could not stop the teleportation of such a high-level divine object like the dark portal, but it did not mean that Duque could not do anything about it. What he did was to control Karazhan and slightly change the coordinates of the surrounding space dimension. Yes, if you want to teleport 10086, then I give you 9527, then you will definitely be in a mess. To completely teleport a person away, it seemed to be an instant, but in fact, it had to scan the entire body at least 100 times every second. Otherwise, if there was any error, even if the teleportation was successful, it would be a pile of meat paste. What Duque destroyed was this process. It looked like an arcane missile attack, but in fact, each shot contained a chaotic space coordinate. He was interfering with the judgment of the dark portal. Ah, what did you do? No, no, no. Nuzul screamed, but he could not stop the dark portal from stopping the teleportation process for his safety. Under the surprised gaze of everyone, the turbulence in space stopped, and Nizul's body quickly solidified from an illusory state. No, no, no. The dark portal, you idiot. Teleport me away. Nizul was still calling out to the dark portal through the soul fragment. However, in a place like Karazhan where space was unstable, teleportation was not so easy. According to the feedback from the system, it seemed that at the dark portal in Draenor, the warlock that Nizul had left behind was hurriedly performing a second summoning ritual in an attempt to pull Nizul back. However, under the control of Duque, Nizul could only be like a fish out of water, struggling futilely on the cold floor. Now, because of the collapse of the Master's will, the two huge nightmare creatures that Nizul had summoned had been dealt with by the Virgin Mary and the Curator. Everyone began to gather around to see how Duque would deal with the third chief of the tribe. Duque snapped his fingers, and an illusory mirror image appeared beside everyone. It was a magic message. The big shots of the Alliance, who had been nervously waiting for the outcome of the decisive battle in Karazhan in the Overwatch Fortress, the Riedridge Mountain Fortress, the Dalajan, the capital of Lordaeron, and the palaces of the various kingdoms, all breathed a sigh of relief when they saw Nizul twitching on the ground like a dying old dog. Ha! We won. I knew Duque could do it. Anduin Lothar was the first to raise his fists high. Good job, Duque. In the Riedridge Mountain, King Lang jumped up. Damn it, my old face. In the Dalajan, King Antonidas touched his red face. Duque again. In Lordaeron, Tyrrhenas had mixed feelings. The reactions of the kings were slightly different. However, in the Overwatch Fortress at the front line against the Horde, the entire Alliance army suddenly burst into thunderous cheers. Long live St. Duke Marcus. Ha ha! Another great chief. I knew that Lord Marcus would not let us down. Duque's holy name had become sacred, and was once again praised by countless soldiers. Facing the Horde again, even the bravest soldiers could not help but feel uneasy. However, when the two sides were confronting each other, there was suddenly news that Duque had defeated the chief of the Horde. This news undoubtedly strengthened every Alliance warrior's confidence in the Alliance's victory. Chapter 705. On the other hand, the Horde was doomed to wail. In order to destroy the Beastman's morale, the Alliance cleverly broadcasted the magic image to the Horde. In the Cursed Lands, the morale of the main force of the Horde was low because they could not attack and were trapped in the Cursed Lands. Now that their path of retreat was suddenly cut off, coupled with the news that their chief had been defeated, panic spread through the entire camp. No. This must be the Alliance's scheme. The Alliance made a fake image to fool us. The former shamans, who were now orc warlocks, ran around to boost the morale of the Horde. Unfortunately, there was almost no effect. The main force of the Horde this time was made up of Kilrog Deadeye's Bloodring clan and Kargith Bladefist's Shattering Palm clan. These two clans that returned from the battlefield could be said to be the strongest in the Horde in terms of combat power. Even the Thunder God, Thunder Blade, Mocking Skull, Crimson Walker and Chomping Bone clans could not be compared to these two clans. Whether it was the quality of individual soldiers or group battles, they were far inferior. Just as the Thunder God clans tried to find a sense of security from the Bloodring and Shattering Palm clans, they discovered that the beastmen of these clans were even worse off than them. The warmongers of the Shattering Palm clan lowered their heads, not saying a word. The elite warriors of the Bloodring clan knelt on the ground and cried, "Ancestor! It's that demon again. Duke Marcus, it's not enough that you killed the Black Hand chief and defeated the Orgrim chief. Do you still want to kill our third chief? It's over. It's over. We can't defeat that Duque." The Thunder God and Thunder Blade clans could only reign supreme after the publicly acknowledged strongest clans were gone. After all, it had only been 2 years. Most of them had not forgotten the glory of the Blackrock and Warsong clans. Now, through word of mouth, they knew that Duke Marcus was the super demon who wiped out the Blackrock clan, chased the Warsong clan into a ravine and killed and captured 2 chiefs. Looking at the dead dog like Nizul in the huge mirror, the morale of the orcs completely collapsed. The news of the orcs falling into chaos quickly spread to the watchtower. This is a good chance. Let us defeat the Horde in one go. Let our Lightning Tank Legion take the lead. Muradin Bronzebeard danced with excitement. The little man could not wait to recreate the glory of the Scorching Gorge. Sure. Taking advantage of the chaos to kill the enemy was a judgment that every qualified commander must have. Anduin made the decision on the spot. Wait. He couldn't use all of them. The dark portal is a little dangerous. Duque called out to Lothar through the magic transmission. Danger? But fighter jets. Duque, give me a convincing reason. The opportunity was fleeting, and Anduin could not let go of such a great opportunity. So what if the door of darkness was restored? As long as they could heavily injure the elites of the tribe who were trapped here, they would definitely be able to deal a blow to the tribe's morale. Duque thought for a moment and gave a plausible reason. Nazul can remotely control the dark portal, and I have yet to remove his soul control. The mana contained in the Gate of Darkness is too powerful. I'm afraid that it'll be dangerous. You can't use everything you have. After that, it seemed that the magic communication was interrupted by some kind of spatial interference, and the communication was cut off. What happened? Muradin asked. It's not a big deal. Karazhan is located above an unstable crack in space, and it's common for magic communication to fail. In the past it was very difficult for us to Mediv, and we often had to send people directly to them. In the past, when it was the worst, Karazhan had to seal the tower directly because of the fluctuations in space. It's not unusual for us to be unable to contact Karazhan for a year or two. Anduin was telling the truth. Since he was the commander-in-chief, they didn't ask any further. However, when they were ready to attack, there was a disagreement. When everyone saw Anduin put on his helmet and looked like he was going to fight, they were indignant. Please, Sir Lothar, you're the commander. It's not the Battle of the Scorching Canyon now, and the front and center formations have collapsed. Why do we need the commander to go directly? The old General Haas smiled and stopped Lothar. Turalian also advised seriously, if we need the commander to go personally to defeat the enemies of chaos, wouldn't it seem that we generals are too incompetent? Yes. Commander, you have enough meritorious service, let us young people get some credit. Ah. Muradin the damned dwarf also joined in. Anduin's face darkened. Muradin, come out. The others can call themselves young, but Muradin, you old bastard, you're almost 100 years old, and you still have the nerve to act young in front of me. Among the dwarves, Muradin was just a young man, and he did not have the slightest self-awareness of an elder. Remembering that he was a great-grandfather among the humans, he immediately shrunk his head. I admit my mistake. Seeing that everyone was not going to let him go, Anduin had no choice but to comply. Turalian, lead 1,000 cavalry to flank the east, and Haas, lead the Eagle Knights to flank the west. Both sides are probing attacks. If the orcs are not panicking, then don't rush. Muradin, cover the fire. Turalian and Haas saluted at the same time. Yes, sir. Only Muradin was extremely depressed. His dream of charging the tanks was temporarily ruined. In various places, the Alliance launched a counterattack. In the Red Ridge Mountains, Reginald led Duque's private troops out of the fortress and launched an attack on the Blacktooth clan. The Blackhand brothers were killed until they cried for their parents. Tirisful Woodlands, Briar. While Wuther and Grom were fighting fiercely, Mograine led the army to launch a counterattack, vowing to destroy the entire Warsong clan here. It was conceivable that in a short time, news of victory would come from all fronts. No one would have thought that Duque would encounter such a huge problem. It was true that Duque and the others had beaten Nazul like a dog, but when they were dealing with him, something strange happened. No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Don't come over. The great chief of the third generation was actually so afraid of death that he was inferior to a little orc girl. At this moment, even the two paladins, Gavin Rad and Theon, had a look of disdain. The joy of defeating such a great chief was incomparable to Lothar killing the Black Hand and Turalian taking down Orgrim. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Nazul struggled to get his injured body as far away from the great devil Duque as possible. Duque sneered. We won't kill you. We will only imprison you. No. I don't believe you, you devil who murdered millions of orcs. Chapter 706. Duque was speechless when the warlock king who used demonic powers said that he was a demon. Just as Duque was about to do something, Nazul's words made Duque's heart almost jump out of his chest. No. I don't want to die. Kill Jaden. Save me. For a moment, darkness enveloped the entire space. A gloomy voice echoed around Duque and the others. Save you? Of course I will, in the way of the Burning Legion. Kill Jaden sneered. Demon Commander? Alexstrasza couldn't help it this time. She strode out and stood beside Duque. Come out. Scum of the Burning Legion, let us have a good fight. On the other side, Duque gritted his teeth. He wasn't sure. In the original history, Nazul was the last to seek death, and was teleported to an unknown void before he was caught by Kill Jaden. Why did this evil god come out now? Kill Jaden spoke again. Fight? Ah. I don't have time to care about you, little Azeroth lizard. However, since my poor contestant is chanting my holy name, wouldn't I be letting down my title of Deceiver, if I don't do anything? Ahaha. Deceiver? Yes. Demon Lord Kil'jaeden was a member of the highest class in Eredar. His evil was as chilling as his power. His status was like Sargeras 25,000 years ago. The most powerful warrior of the Titan race was selected by the Titans. Like Archimonde, he was one of Sargeras' left and right hands. Kil'jaeden enslaved the Dreadlord race and their king, Tichondrius, and made them swear to follow him, secretly take care of all kinds of matters for him, and assimilate any other potential race into the Burning Legion. Every world that was invaded by the Legion was left with only flames and ashes. The Legion led by Archimonde was invincible, and its scale and destructive power were unparalleled. All of this was inseparable from Kil'jaeden's wisdom and strategy. He was a disguise master that left a deep impression on people. He used all kinds of different appearances to get in touch with every race he wanted to conquer. Let's not talk about the faraway ones. Right in front of him was the Draenei, who he had transformed into Nuzul's wife and tricked the orcs into attacking the remnants of the prophet Velen who had betrayed the entire Eredar race. In the game, Duque only felt that Archimonde the Defiler and Kil'jaeden the Trickster were big bosses that were difficult to defeat. But in reality, even a transmigrator like Duque couldn't help but be amazed by the Trickster's ever-changing tricks. Kil'jaeden rarely mentioned his own name, but when he did, Duque shuddered. System Elf. Scan all the surrounding data. I want to capture any fluctuations. Understood, host. After scanning for less than a third of a second, Duque finally knew what Kil'jaeden's trump card was. Gul'dan's Skull. Under a thick layer of shielding spells, Gul'dan's Skull was reacting in a way that no one could understand other than Duque. At this moment, Duque finally understood why a mere demigod like Gul'dan's Skull could become a god-level magic weapon. This damned skull contained the power of the fallen titan, Sargeras. Right now, an earth-shattering explosion was brewing inside the skull. This was no different from using Sargeras's corpse to play. Corpse explosion. Duque couldn't imagine how powerful this explosion would be. Looking at the power data determined by the system, Duque was willing to bet that apart from Alexstrasza, no one here would survive. Even if Duque activated the entire Karazhan defense system, it wouldn't be able to withstand it. *CK. So Nuzul had attacked Karazhan to deliver a nuclear bomb. I've been tricked. Time seemed to freeze. Everything around him seemed to slow down countless times in that instant. Tyrion Fordring's face was filled with nervousness. His arms holding the two-handed war hammer swelled up until the armors creaked. Gavin Rad stood in front of Duke and took out an epic-ranked shield from his storage space. He also changed his hammer to a one-handed hammer. The Windrunner sisters pulled their bowstrings and stood back to back, approaching Duque with small steps. Aurelia's lively eyes moved quickly, as if she wanted to find Kil'jaeden hiding in the void. Sasha glanced worriedly at Duque from time to time. Only Alexstrasza had her hands on her hips, proudly looking around with a domineering gaze. As long as the commander of the Burning Legion dared to come out, she would immediately beat him up. Apart from Duque, no one knew that Kil'jaeden would not appear at all. At this moment, Duque thought of countless ways, but it was not that simple. They were like unlucky people who had swallowed poisonous grass. Even the venom had seeped into their blood vessels. It was not something that could be spat out just by washing their stomachs. At this critical moment, Duque suddenly glanced at Nuzul, who looked like he was dead. Several fangs were emitting a faint red soul glow. Yes, I got it. Didn't the dark portal want to save Nuzul? If you want it, I'll give it to you. In the blink of an eye, dozens of Duque's doppelgangers appeared. They made various movements. This time, not only did they disturb their own people, but even Kil'jaeden, who was peeping at Duque and the others through Nuzul's soul, was confused. Only one of Duke's doppelgangers rushed to Nuzul's side and kicked Nuzul, who was still holding the skull of Gul'dan in his hand. The doppelganger kicked Nuzul's stomach. Ah! The third great chieftain screamed and his whole body flew up. In the next moment, the void behind him suddenly opened, and a dark portal with a ferocious snake-shaped sculpture on the door beam appeared in front of everyone. Duque. The queen was very surprised. Wasn't Karazhan's dimension controlled by Duque? Duque did not answer. He let the dark portal swallow Nuzul, who was like a dead dog. He even let one of his doppelgangers stand in front of Alexstrasza. Impossible. In the void, Kil'jaeden's cry of surprise finally came. The enemy's fear, I'm glad. Even though everyone still did not understand what had happened, for Kill Jaden to be so frightened, it could only mean that Duque had made the right choice. Go back. Duque's main body grabbed one of the Windrunner sisters' arms with his left and right hands, and directly dragged the two sisters back. At the same time he used Flash. Something that could make Duque scream so heartbreakingly must be very serious. After less than a tenth of a second, it was the more agile sisters who used Flash to drag Duque into the gate of Karazhan. The queen followed with the two holy knights. Almost at the moment when the door to the balcony was closed, an unparalleled loud roar came. Chapter 707. Karazhan was a magical place. This extraordinary wizard tower built on a spatial crack had the ability to protect space that most wizard towers in the world did not have because of the geographical advantage. Aurelia had personally tried shooting arrows into the open door from outside the platform. The door was obviously empty, but the arrows would naturally bounce off when they hit the door. This was because the inner layer of the door and the platform seemed to be connected, but in fact they were not the same space. Even in Karazhan, the moment the door closed, it still felt a huge shock from space. The vibration of the spatial laws destroyed most of the balcony in an instant. In Duque's mind, there was a three-dimensional model of the situation in Karazhan. In the display, Duque clearly saw that a granite boulder weighing more than 10 tons was picked up by an invisible supergiant and floated in the air. It did not crack nor did it shatter. Instead, it was directly swallowed by the void. There was no terrifying shockwave like a big explosion, but a large area of space collapsed as if it was swallowed by a black hole. Teleport. For most wizards, teleporting when space was unstable was courting death. However, under the system's calculations, Duque grasped the only stable millisecond and directly teleported himself and his companions to the highest floor of the wizard tower. Even the Red Dragon Queen couldn't help but take a few more glances at Duque at such exquisite control. Even Aurelia, who was used to seeing big scenes, paled a little. Explosion? What happened? Can you withstand it? Duque gritted his teeth. It's okay, at most 1/3 of Karazhan will collapse. Duque's face was darker than the bottom of a pot. If he had not kicked Nazul back into the dark portal, it would have been the entire Karazhan that had been blown up. That bastard killed Jaden. What AF * King's scheme? Ghoul Dan's skull was a super-nuclear bomb. Usually it could provide almost endless dark power, and it could also be detonated at a critical moment. In the original history, it was this thing that worked together with the dark portal that blew up the entire Draenor into pieces. Now it was being used as a nuclear bomb to blow up Karazhan. Duque could imagine what would happen after Karazhan, an important part of the Azeroth dimensional barrier, was destroyed. The dimensional barrier of this planet was also a huge magic circle created by the Titans of Creation. Within the formation, the dragon aspect and the dragon race's power would be greatly amplified. If Karazhan, one of the spatial nodes, was destroyed, it would undoubtedly affect the entire magic circle. Of course, for the Burning Legion, it would be even better if they could kill one of the dragon aspects, Alexstrasza, in one go. That bastard killed Jaden. He actually predicted that I would ask Alexstrasza for help. Duque was trembling all over. He had been tricked. Without a doubt. This was the first time Duque had been fooled since he entered the world of Azeroth. Duque, who had been successful in every endeavor because he grasped the trend of history, finally suffered a small setback under the sneak attack of Kill Jaden, one of the final bosses of the Burning Legion. It wasn't that Duque hadn't thought of this possibility. Unfortunately, as he changed the history of the world more and more, many things were beyond his control and budget. This was the best proof of that. Originally, Kill Jaden would only appear to take away Nazul's soul after he was defeated. He didn't know if it was because Duque had crippled Kazak in one go and slapped the faces of Kill Jaden's two female adjutants, causing the two coquettish bitches to go and complain about him. In the end, it directly led to Kill Jaden personally making a plan. It seems that we've been tricked. Alexstrasza sighed. Yes. Duque's face turned green. The queen patted Duque on the shoulder. Don't blame yourself too much. You've already done very well. Even I didn't react just now. If I had taken that explosion head-on, I'm afraid I would have been seriously injured even if I didn't die. When the queen said this, the people around her all felt a lingering fear. Think about it, this kind of big explosion that could be felt across several dimensions. How could a mortal's small body withstand it? The queen continued, for you to be able to do this at such a young age is already a miracle. There's no need to insist on miracles among miracles, understand? Duque's clenched fists finally relaxed. Understood. Speaking of which, what's going on outside? Sasha asked weakly. Duque quickly let the system check and the results disappointed him. Sorry, the spatial turbulence is too serious. We have temporarily lost contact with the outside world. However, this explosion came from the dark portal on the other side of Draenor. It was like this when we were just connected, I'm afraid over there. Planet Draenor was probably going to explode just like in history. Duque's guess was right. It was precisely because Nazul had placed that summoning ritual at the dark portal on the other side of Draenor. So when the skull of Ghoul, Dan, exploded, the first thing to explode was the dark portal on the other side. The orcs who were entrenched near the dark portal on Nazul's orders fell into the deepest despair. Most of them didn't even react to the sudden explosion. In that instant, the originally calm dark portal suddenly had an extremely intense reaction. The black light it produced devoured all other colors in the world, making them unable to see anything. They could only vaguely hear the sharp howls of the wargs and the exclamations of their companions, but none of the orcs knew what was happening. That terrifying sound was quickly replaced by a rumbling sound. Just before they could realize what was happening, a deafening collision sound was heard. The orcs could not control their bodies and fell hard to the ground. The unlucky ones lost consciousness in an instant. For the powerhouses who still retained their consciousness, perhaps this was the real cruelty. As they struggled to breathe in pain, they suddenly found that the darkness had dissipated. When they immediately looked in the direction of the dark portal, it was already gone. The giant sculpture that guarded the dark portal had become a pile of stones that did not look the slightest bit similar. The three huge pillars that formed the frame of the portal, the three pillars that had witnessed the glory and greatness of the tribe, had also turned into rubble. There were no signs of Azeroth here. In the next moment, the entire world seemed to be screaming in the flames. The raging flames spread even further with the wind. Most of the land collapsed, and the huge impact crushed the entire land into broken waves that stacked up layer by layer. Every beastman next to the dark door was engulfed by that world-shaking explosion. Chapter 708. Nazul. The call was full of mockery. It woke up the strongest orc warlock, the great chief of the tribe. Ah! The moment he regained consciousness, Nazul screamed like a little girl who had been bullied. Of course, his screams were very unpleasant to hear. At the same time, all of his senses were filled with a strange feeling of nothingness. It was the feeling of his entire body floating in the weightless void. Nazul squeezed his eyes shut, hoping to dispel the feeling that was enough to make him crazy. However, it was of no use. The howl from the depths of his soul kept eroding his consciousness. In the hypnotic repetition of the single sound, he once again heard the voice that made him extremely uncomfortable. Nazul? He widened his eyes and looked around. Not far away in the strange whirlpool of light and shadow, he saw something. It was the existence that imprisoned him here. Nazul? The call of his name once again resounded in this dark space of nothingness. Nazul felt that there was a bigger and darker shadow shrouding him. He looked up and saw the true face of the shadow that terrified him. It was a huge creature wearing blood-red armor. This creature's facial features were very similar to the Draenei that Nazul had ordered to be slaughtered, but his face was bright red. There were two short curved horns on his tall temples, and he had a beard on his chin. Two tentacle-like things protruded from the bottom of his mouth. A few earrings shone, and his eyes flashed with a deep yellow light. Almost through the connection of their souls, Nazul immediately knew the identity of this mysterious existence. Yes, it was Kil'jaeden who had tricked his soul through a blood contract. In theory, this was the master that he had to serve for eternity. My lord. Nazul gasped. Although his limbs were still imprisoned, he tried his best to bow to the other party. Nazul, my little servant who is not pious enough. Kil'jaeden, the demon commander of the Burning Legion, replied with a grin. Do you think that I have forgotten about you? No, my lord, of course not. In fact, Nazul did hope that Kil'jaeden would let him go like a fart, and then completely forget about him. Unfortunately, that didn't seem to be the case. You useless fellow, you ignored my orders and gave up on leading the orcs to attack Azeroth. He couldn't even bring a bomb into Karazhan. If it wasn't for your cowardly, summoning ritual, Azeroth would have one less annoying dragon aspect. You've disappointed me and you've made me pay an unnecessary price. Do you know that? The demon commander laughed, and his ear-piercing voice sent chills down one's spine. No, master, I can make up for everything. Nazul hurriedly changed his words. No, I've lost my patience with you. Now, it's time for you to pay for your failure. No, 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 no. The void echoed with Nazul's screams. Pieces of flesh and blood were torn from Nazul's body. The souls of the dead surrounded him and dug into his soul with their claws. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere, hovering in the air not far away. In the next moment, the flesh and blood returned to Nazul's body, making his body as good as before. Then it was torn apart again and the cycle started again. Along with the cruel torture, Kill Jaden's laughter continued to echo, and his huge demonic body also trembled with the laughter. That terrifying and strange laughter was enough to make Nazul's soul and will collapse. This was just the beginning of the nightmare. In Karazhan, Duque sighed. He didn't need to think to know that Nazul must have knelt down and become Kill Jaden's toy, just like in history. Then it wouldn't be long before Kill Jaden, who was tired of playing, coerced Nazul's helpless soul, and gave him one last chance to serve the Burning Legion. Otherwise he would have to endure eternal torture. The weak Nazul would once again accept the conditions set by the demon. His soul would be placed into a carefully carved block of ice. This block of ice, collected from the distant distorted void, was as hard as a diamond. The first Lich King was born. However, Duque couldn't care less about these things for the time being. There were too many things to do in front of him. 1/3 of Karazhan had been destroyed, and everything near the ruler's terrace had been destroyed. Even the surrounding stairs had been affected. Well, there were really broken stairs. The entire Karazhan Mage Tower was covered with shocking cracks, as if it had experienced a terrible earthquake. No, this was worse than an earthquake. Because an earthquake would not cause the spatial passage of Karazhan back to Azeroth to collapse. Now, there was no way out, and the spatial defense that had been set up before had almost completely collapsed. Now, a large number of void creatures rushed out of the spatial cracks, simultaneously attacking the main gate of Karazhan and the door of the library. Ah! An abandoned mage tower. Kill the guards. Rob him. Countless humanoid creatures wrapped in bandages, with their cores shining with mysterious radiance and illusory energy, charged into Karazhan. These creatures, which were 2 people tall, were called ethereals. They were a group of ethereal thieves that wandered the various voids, constantly looking for valuable items. Kill these invaders. Theon rode his Einherjar warhorse and took the lead, smashing down with his hammer. Beside him was Gavin Rad, and behind him were hundreds of translucent Einherjar warriors. Khadgar floated in the air, casting fire magic. Huge fireballs were thrown out one after another, hitting these fellows who valued money more than their lives, exploding into sparks. At the main entrance, Alexstrasza was guarding the gate and no one could get through. With a flap of her illusory dragon wings, one of the void creatures that was rushing over screamed in pain and flew out of the main gate for nearly 1,000 meters before stabilizing itself. However, it immediately discovered that there was a mysterious flame spreading uncontrollably on its body, burning even in the void. It tried hard to extinguish the flames, but in the end, it was burned to ashes in front of its companions. It took a full 2 hours to destroy no less than 5 groups of enemies. Only then did those void creatures with a little bit of intelligence realize that this strange and mysterious building that suddenly floated into the void was not a pushover. Only then did they leave resentfully or watch from afar. Everyone returned to the top floor of the Mage Tower and gathered around Duque. How is it? Theon asked. Very bad. In a sense, because of the Big Bang, Karazhan was separated from planet Azeroth. Duque rubbed between his eyebrows. Ugh. Everyone's face darkened. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.